right. Cool. So, it's an exciting week. Affinity was at an OTB tournament. Baron, I think, has been playing weekly games at the chess club on Tuesday evenings, maybe. So probably had an
Yep.
OTB battle this week as well. Um, and if I recall correctly, it was something like 2 hours or so of suffering in which you held a draw.
Yep. Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Um, and Finity, in your tournament, you played like 6 games or so. Let me see, five, six, seven. Yeah, you played 6 tournament games.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. It was a lot.
Tell us first of all, like how it felt, sort of just your your feelings. What?
Uh yeah, so not great.
Mm-hmm.
Um I mean it was fun to be playing over the board again and competing again. So I love I'm a very competitive person, so like that fuels me and makes me happy, but the games themselves I wasn't too proud of.
Okay.
Also like time management was really weird over the board. Like sometimes I was moving too fast. Sometimes I was felt like I was spending an eternity and not coming up with anything, and then still just making a move.
Yeah.
So time management was weird. Um, and 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 just because where the tournament was, I was like exhausted by the
Yeah.
end of the day physically.
Cool.
So, but overall, I enjoyed it, but I'm not happy with the games if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, it's supposed to be exhausting. First tournament in a while is going to be exhausting, but also it's going to have time trouble issues. Usually, confidence issues
Mm-hmm.
are really like common with being rusty. Um, and as I've said many times, like when you're playing games, it does include like what you know and whether you can apply it and how you calculate, but
Right.
also tons and tons of random little subconscious skills that we almost never talk about or work on, like knowing when to make a move and knowing when to stop and think and uh,
Yep.
knowing when to double check a line or when to just play it. Like there's so many little things that you calibrate just by practicing and that you never sort of formally think about or learn. So, you just have to play 2 or 3 tournaments and then you've got them again.
Right. Yeah. There was specifically one game where my opponent told me he was like, I've only been playing since COVID, essentially. And then so I decided to choose an opening that, of course, I know nothing about. Uh, and and because he survived so well to the opening, I was thrown off, and then I started making mistakes and kind of threw the game.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think I was probably losing from the beginning of the game just because of my opening choice, but how well he responded to it. But
Yeah. Um, this predates our time with Baron, but Baron, when I first started working with Finity, his greatest weakness by far was the opening. Like the opening phase was just, you know,
it's
I
bad. You can
mean,
say bad. It's all
how
right.
to describe it? It was like Nordovik esque or something. Oh shoot, he's there.
Oh,
Just kidding. It was
that's okay.
no.
I've seen some of his openings and like, yeah.
Yeah, no. It was the weakness in Affinity's game, and we worked on it for a while in our first session. But it's been a while since we did it, and looking at the games from this last tournament, like today, we're gonna have to flash back to that a little bit, and we're gonna spend part of our lesson on the opening phase,
Okay.
because hopefully Finity also is a little bit like excited to go play another tournament at some point, or
Yeah,
even if
yeah.
not a tournament, to play some like serious training or practice games here and there.
Hmm.
And therefore I think it's going to be really valuable for him to do like a brush up on that. So we'll see if
Cool.
you were already already know everything about this unit that I did with him before, or if it's got some new points for you. We'll see. And then the other thing we're going to do today is we're going to look at this first calculation exercise together. So keep working on our main thing. So I will, if you two can both go into live chess, I'll invite you to a series of different boards as we go through things. All right, so you should see invitations popping up to the first one here. And hi, Nordovik. Welcome. We're happy to have you. I was just teasing there. I'd already seen your name. I knew you were there. So, all right. So we'll start off with this calculation exercise. Wait, is this exercise 1? Yeah, this is exercise 1. Okay. Is this the one you got too, Affinity?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the one I did. Yep.
Now, did you do this written or in your head?
I decided to do it in my head just because of how much time I had. So I set a timer for 15 minutes.
Okay. And Baron, did you do this? You wrote something to send to me, but did you first do it in your head or with writing?
I set up a board, figured it all out, and then after the time was up, I started writing down the lines, and
then
then
you
I
wrote down some stuff based on what you remembered.
a
Great.
PGN to send you.
Okay. Great. I have sort of PGN Fen here from Baron. So Finity, you want to tell me what you thought of this position here? I started with this knight takes b3 move just so you guys would get the context that black was picking off a pawn on the queen side and sort of making progress there, but the knights are committed while they're there, and that these rooks are in some tactical situation. What did you think of this?
Oh man, so I tried to generate an attack on the king, just because of the placement of the f5 pawn against g6, and I thought that my target squares would be, well, pretty much just h7. Was kind of the only target square I was looking at.
Super.
But man, could I not make it work?
Okay. That's fine. This was to push you guys on the calculation level, because you've been doing a very good job of recognizing when there is or isn't the attack, what the focus square should be. And we're just working on, more and more advanced calculations. Okay, so what first moves did you consider?
So for me, the biggest move that I was looking at was f takes g6.
That's correct.
As a first move. And if black ever opens up the f file, then white has some ideas with bringing the queen to e5, because right now his rook's hanging. White's rook's hanging. So this queen to e5 check or pinned rook, depending on what happens in various lines,
right,
could win the piece back and kind of draw the king out a bit. And then alternatively, I was also looking at queen moving to h6 and then coming up to h7. But like I said, none of these lines really seem to work. Another thing I didn't really get a chance to calculate that I wanted to look at, though, was the strange f5 response from black.
Like if they did this in response. But you didn't get time to look at this move. But
yeah, I didn't really get a look at it.
Cool. Well, that's very thorough of you to have thought of that as a possible candidate move for black. It's like the square that white completely owns, right? So to think of that as a possible disruption is really, really good open-mindedness. And, during certain phases of the game, being open-minded and looking at lots of things just leads to time trouble and is like pointless because you should just play, a good move.
Right.
And then you get to decisive points like this where like you're trying to checkmate somebody and you're down a rook, and this is when you want to, be open-minded and see every possible move for them. Yesterday I was just browsing the internet and saw this like endgame puzzle taken from a game, and just the very first move, it just looks like white has no moves, and in fact, in the actual game, the player resigned in that position. But knowing that it's a puzzle, I was like, what are all the possible moves we could play? And then I was like, oh, okay. It's just some absolutely crazy move. And it didn't take that long to find it once you turn off that lock on what's reasonable or not, and like open up, right? Because we talked about the subconscious processes, right? Like one of them is your brain has to normally just cut everything out. It just has to prune at the very first move, almost every single move, right? And say like, we're not looking at queen e2, we're not looking at queen d1, right? We're not looking at rook a1, hanging both rooks at once and moving away from the black king. Like your brain is just pruning everything. It's telling you like, no, you can't look at that. You can't look at that. You can't look at that. Right? It's letting you look at, 1% of what's going on at most. And you have to somehow turn that mode off now and then. And that's mostly done subconsciously, but you can also do it sometimes by being like, okay, here's where I just have to find something, or I've lost the game, so, or I feel like I can win, so I'm going to switch off that mode and just look at any move. Knight takes g6 first instead of pawn takes, maybe. Just plop a knight on h5, then see. So that's great that you looked at f5. Was there any move for white other than fg6 that you thought was really likely on the first move?
For white, it's just, I looked at rook takes rook,
great,
but now I can't take f5 without trading queens.
Yeah,
and that stinks.
So stinky.
I looked at bishop to b6 briefly.
Nice.
But then I thought probably just queen d7, and then what was the point of that move? And I did look at knight g6 a little bit, but the problem I kept seeing for white was that if black does h takes g6 on whatever ends up there,
keeping this square in hand.
Yeah, it's hard for white to break through here.
Yeah,
he's not. It's gonna. At least I think so.
Yeah, you're right. It's very, very hard for white to break through here. Like looking at this position, I'm not at all convinced that white could break through. If I were just playing along in a game and saw this position, my instinct would not be telling me that white could break through. The fact that f takes g6 wins here is a surprise to me. It's very, very counterintuitive to me. If black hadn't played knight takes b3, I probably wouldn't even look at f takes g6. Like if the game were just building and I weren't forced to look at every move, right? When black plays knight takes b3, you're like, oh shoot, critical moment. So you turn off that mode that blocks stuff, right?
Yeah.
But if I didn't have that mode turned off and I were just sort of like, how do I keep building here? I would never be looking for the win yet for white. I would just play h4, h5.
Yeah.
To increase the pressure on g6. I don't feel I have enough to crack just yet. So I would go h4, h5, and once I've got the pawn on h5, my brain would switch and start saying, like, where's my kill? Right? Yeah. So this one's kind of surprising. And in fact, if black didn't play knight b3, f takes g6 wouldn't quite work yet because this knight would be covering e6. So.
It's funny because when I originally opened this puzzle for the first 30 seconds to a minute, I was looking at it without knight takes b3. And I'm like, I was just looking at it, and then I went back to the instruction and I saw black base knight takes b3, and I was like, oh, that changes everything.
Yeah. Yeah. But so even after knight b3, I'm very surprised that white has something strong here. Um, which is cool. It's always fun to like find one of those positions that like pushes your understanding. Um, but the fact that they've played knight b3 forces me to look for it, right? Because
Yeah.
I don't want to give away this pawn for free. I don't have anywhere to go with my rook. I don't want to trade it. Rook c8, queen c8, as both of you thought, is pretty annoying because we're not in the business of trading queens here for white. And in this position here, Baron, said he didn't want to move the pawn, and he mentioned knight d5 as another candidate move, but he successfully defended it for black anyway. It's a reasonable idea, but this knight that was, far from the king side gets to trade for one of the pieces on the king side, and I think that's about where you ended it. You just traded that off and said, like, it's not working for white. So one move in this position that might have been interesting would be to here play like queen h4, like after making the trade, to now try and avoid the queen trade and go here and still look if you've got something like this. But taking your queen off this diagonal means that black's now controlling e6 with the queen. And from what I've seen, this probably doesn't have much chance for white. If you go for queen h6, knight h5, which is the other, right? If you're picking which square to focus on. If you decide that you can't break through h7, you go for queen h6, knight h5. It's almost like a doomed idea with this bishop covering this diagonal. Like, you're going to have to commit to it. The opponent sees it coming, and it's pre-defended. So, like, you're doing all that to get a knight to h5 as a sack, and then maybe try and disrupt your opponent with f6 once your knight's there. To me, really, really implausible. Okay. Now we're going to take a look at what Baron suggested. So, yeah. Right. He figured out that, he wasn't going to like retreat the rook anywhere. I mean, the knights are covering like every square, right? So basically he could trade rooks, which he didn't like, or he could just leave the rook hanging. Now, I think these two variations with taking on g6 are variations that I just added. I don't think that in the calculations you wrote down that there was anything showing exactly why you rejected the rook sacrifice, but you did think of it. That was the first thing you thought about, was sacking it.
Right, but I just couldn't see a line that would justify it.
Yeah.
I looked at, the only move I really looked at after sacrificing the rook was f takes g6.
Yeah.
But then I couldn't find a way to actually get in there on the dark squares because I couldn't really attack, I thought, on the light squares.
Yeah, this one's totally surprising. And sometimes they give you a question without an answer. Sometimes they give you something easier. Sometimes they give you something harder. So keeping you on your toes and pushing you. So anyway, so let's look at what you did pick though. So you picked rook takes b4 apparently, right? You said I settled on the exchange sacrifice. Rook b4, pawn takes b4, knight d5, e6 from black. You trade. Play rook f8, queen e6, king g7. That's your main line. And your comment here was, here I thought I had queen takes b3 when you were calculating. Classic, right? Classic. And that's one of the reasons why we do these exercises where then we like write down something and then read what we wrote, right?
Right.
Because how else do you know if you've got a pattern of like trying to capture like through your own pieces or not? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, right? But if you do this kind of an exercise 4 or 5 times and you start noticing, your queens and bishops are moving through pieces of your own once you get to move, let's say 4 or 5 of their variation, but not on move 1, 2, or 3, it's giving you some really useful information about what your strengths and weaknesses are and what to like look for and what to double check or not double check. So that's really great, just that you were able to see this, So you thought you had queen b3, and so this looks bad for white. In your calculation, you had been planning queen takes b3, bishop takes g3, right? You noticed the knight on g3 was hanging and concluded this line was bad for white.
Well, if I could actually go through the knight and take it, so just sort of bringing the queen to b3, and then they take my knight, then I thought I don't have anything.
Right.
Because now my queen's way over there.
Yeah.
And I don't have an attack.
Right.
But in this position, maybe I have something, but I was trying to find a good move here for white.
Yeah.
That would justify all this, but I couldn't. I ran out of time before I could find anything concrete. So I wasn't giving up on it yet.
Right.
I just thought.
So now correct me if I'm wrong, but from your comments, it sounds to me like you decided that you would go for rook b4, but the variations you'd found so far didn't justify it. Like you didn't like this position that you were headed towards just yet.
Yes, I was unsure about this variation, about if this is actually good for me or not.
Mm-hmm.
But in the game, I would have probably just played rook takes b4 because I could see no other move.
Right.
And I was sort of in it. Now, if it was looking at where things were at before black could have played knight takes b3, I don't know if I would have gone for the exchange sack.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that totally makes sense. So it was kind of like a mix of other things didn't look good to you, you'd invested time in it, you had to move, which is part of the reality, right? I mean, your puzzles, like your games, should have times where you're like, I played this move because I just had to make a move, right? I mean, that makes the puzzle much, much realer. Yeah, maybe hoping that there would come up something better for white, but not too thrilled with this position so far. Now let me show you guys the actual answer to this, just to shock you with it. So pawn takes g6, the correct move. And now I would say, I mean, it's very cool that Finity suggests f5, but probably three main moves to consider for white are black accepting the rook sacrifice or black taking the pawn on g6. Is that fair, Finity?
Yeah. I thought if black accepts, I could always take on f7 instead of h7.
Okay, because you really wanted this square, right?
Yeah.
And then you're expecting rook takes and g6 or queen e6?
I was looking at queen e6.
Queen e6 first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just move the knight and win the rook.
All right, so now you're expecting this rook to move somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And then if it does, you're looking at knight moves.
Yeah.
Of different kinds.
That's what I was looking at, yeah.
Yeah, cool. If you had already played g6 and this pawn were here, you'd have knight g6 as an extra move, but your opponent would have bishop f6 to block the file, right? So it might even be nice to just have something like this. Okay, cool. And what did you think of your chances here?
I thought that was cool. I thought it was cool enough. I thought it was good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that continuation.
Cool.
And so I figured that I'd probably be winning my rook back in those lines. And since I'm winning my rook back and I've pulled the king out, that I've gained something here.
Yeah.
And obviously, if I'm able to take on f7, I've gained a pawn. Right.
Yeah. Right.
So.
Yeah, if you get your rook back, you've gained a pawn and opened their king.
Exactly. So I thought that was really good. Cool. So then I kind of stopped looking at that variation and started looking at not rook takes and the various ways they
and probably the move that you struggled with the most was h takes right here.
Yep.
And I wonder if you considered knight takes g6 in this position.
I did.
You did? Okay.
Yep.
So what did you see here after knight takes g6? You got really close, Finity. This is really good.
What did I see at knight takes g6? So I saw rook takes and then... Oh, well, hold on. Black's got to make a move. Oh, yeah, rook takes. And then here I ran out of ideas.
Okay.
So...
Yeah, you're really close. I bet this position is good for white if you just take their rook and then push g6.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. Knight takes rook. But I didn't see g6 as a follow-up. I think it
Yeah.
just ends there. And I
So
was
they
like,
do something like this, and
I kind of lost the knight in that line, I thought.
right, yeah, you're down a piece. This is now a piece sack versus a rook sack.
Yep.
But I think g6 is going to be strong enough to carry the game for you in this line, because if their pawn moves to f6, you've got queen e6 winning. And if it doesn't, you can take on f7 with your pawn with doubled check. They have to go over, and you can go rook f5 to h5. Or you might be able to play rook f7, chase their queen somewhere, and then play queen h5. That might also win. So both of these captures look potentially winning to me, and I don't see how black really avoids them. Maybe there's some line with bishop f6. Now if pawn takes, the king's planning to recapture and stop queen e6 from there. But maybe we ramp up the pressure for one more move here.
Queen h5 if king takes.
Yeah, and also pawn takes, king takes, queen h5. I was calculating the same thing, that might actually work. It's hard to be sure.
Yeah, now we got a rook f4.
Rook f4, yeah. Yeah. Might work. Unless it's a total knockout, building the tension like this is going to be really good. Here I think you're threatening to win with rook takes bishop. So
yeah. Yeah, I stopped calculating after knight takes f8.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I didn't see the follow-up.
Right. There also might be a threat of playing like g7, queen d8, and then knight takes f6, pawn takes f6, queen h5, just going into h8. That might work too. So there's like so many threats here from white. I'm guessing that one of them works. I don't know if this looks plausible or not to you two, this position here. Like, is it likely or unlikely that it's winning for white?
Hard to say for me.
It's on the borderline.
Yeah, this is what I would play, but
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I was thinking instead of bishop f6 to try queen g7.
Yeah, I was looking at queen g7 too.
Okay. And where's she going after this move?
She even had knight f5. Because you have
a
fork. Yeah.
That's a nice move too. Yeah, knight f5. If here.
Okay.
Yeah, so she's basically trapped by this move, right? And then something like this.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, well, now I'm struggling to find anything good for
black in this position.
For black, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's cool. This g6 as a follow-up is a big piece of the idea, right? I mean, already here, when we take on g6, if the opponent takes, one of the big deals is that after we take out one of those pawns, we can play g6 and take out the last one too, right?
Yeah.
So this g6 is a very important part of the mechanism here for white.
Yeah, I didn't consider g6 when I was trying to sack the rook.
Yeah. So the other important thing in this line here is this variation.
Yeah, and then you win the queen.
Rook f8,
Yeah,
Yeah.
which undefends this and wins the queen. You guys saw that.
I calculated this one, but I was like, well, what
Wow.
if they take the other way and then
All right.
nothing?
You guys are doing good. Okay, really good. You weren't sure about the rook c4 knight f8 either, huh? Same thing. Whether
Yeah,
white has
I
enough.
had, I think, an idea here. I think I might have given white an extra move of just either queen takes, probably just queen takes c8, and then you have knight takes e7 forking.
Uh-huh.
But I realized I'd given white 2 moves in one of these lines,
Yeah.
but that was another idea I was thinking about.
In addition to knight f8, what do you guys think of taking the bishop instead of the rook? So now we're sacking a whole rook, right? Not a piece. And then just playing g6. Give me your instinct, like 10%, 50%, 80%. What's the chance that white has a reasonable position down a rook here?
I think white's crushing.
That's crazy, right? That we
Yeah.
could take that defending bishop instead of the rook, be down a whole rook, play g6, and maybe have a good position.
Yeah.
All we're threatening is pawn takes f7 winning. We don't have like a ton of other threats. But the f pawn can't really move to avoid it because of queen e6.
Yeah.
So
Queen e6
But
or queen h5.
If they play f6, queen h5, how does they stop mate on h7?
yeah, that's what I was saying. They can't move the f pawn because of this. If this move also wins, which it looks like it does, then white's got 2 different ways to win.
Yeah.
So they
What's
can't.
the finish? I'm trying to look at or if they
Yeah.
play f6 and then you play queen e6, Are
You
you
win
just-
your rook back.
running the rook back, or you checkmating
Yeah,
them?
you just take this.
Huh?
Oh,
mean-
you know what? You had rook f5.
Right.
Yeah, I mean we're winning sort of
Yeah.
without
Yeah,
any risks.
I
You
feel
could
like
play
we're
knight
crushing.
f5 and g7. You could play rook f5 to
Yeah.
h5. You could take the rook and then do those things. And as you're pointing out, I mean, I think this move's checkmate. So
Yeah.
we don't need to take the rook. Okay, so not a lot of moves for the opponent. Let's take this hanging piece and go cover these weak squares. That's got to be the best chance, because if this rook stays dangling here, white also has the move queen h5, just threatening here, which is going to force black to take, and then queen g6, queen h6, queen e6, take the rook, etc. And then we don't have, I mean, we don't need to look any further for checkmates if we know that the whole attack is for no sacrifice. So let's try this move here. This gives black a chance of defending, right?
I don't think so. Pawn f7 check.
Pawn
Got to step into
f7.
the h file.
God,
Queen
the rook
h5.
can't block on this square.
Yeah, because of the bishop.
Comes here, but at least it stops white from going into h6, right? In some position like this. Although white's got knight f5. Oh.
Where's the mate?
Oh, I think it. Wait. No, shoot. Can we?
All right, you guys better be
No.
able to find a win here, so I'm going to let you do it.
Yeah, it's knight h4, I think. No? Hold on. Maybe not. Knight h4, queen g5. It's back.
Oh, is that it? I'm looking. I think queen h6 check, king takes f7, knight d6 check.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's mate. Yeah.
Right, and then they have to go king g7 or king g8. Ugh.
No. Now we just repeat.
That may
Oh,
work,
wait,
but
no, I think I had it then.
you got it.
And I think we had Queen G6 check
Okay.
here, and then Rook F5 after King H8.
Rook F5. Wow.
Oh wait, no, they have the Rook.
Six. Yeah.
We can just win the Queen with Rook takes F8, then Knight F7 check, and then they have to trade.
Yeah.
Bravo. That's a good calculation. There's also a fancy touch here possible, like this.
Ooh.
Yeah. I had a similar position to this kind of idea.
All
in
right.
The game I played on the dojo.
Good job. Okay, so honestly, there's a very good chance that white's just winning here.
Yeah.
If we trade off the bishop instead of the rook.
No.
It's more comfortable to like really reduce how much we've sacked like this, right? Because
Yeah.
if you think that, first of all, you know your opponent can't do this because then they're just down material, right? I mean, they can't play f6 because they're just down material. But also when you're only down a piece, you're accustomed to being down a piece for an attack, right? You know, like, oh, if I've got 2 pawns and like an attack, that's probably less risky. And this is probably winning. But knight e5 might be even better. Who knows? But it certainly shows us the impact of this move. I mean, just like, if I ask you to defend this position for black, suddenly you'd be like, what? What are you expecting of me, you know?
Yeah.
But as white, it's a little bit harder to sometimes imagine that you're going to actually win with something this speculative looking.
If I had seen G6, I think I would have been way more confident.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In
Okay. I think that basically beats H takes G6, right? I think more or less. Like, we beat this move by winning the queen. We beat Rook C4 in 2 different ways, I think. And what else are they going to do, right? Otherwise, we're going to play Rook C8, Queen C8, Knight E7 next if they do nothing.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Rook E7 covering this, for example. Let's remember that maybe the best thing we can do is just G7, just checkmate
Hold on,
them.
I think you had something better.
Better than
But I
what?
have to go back 2 moves.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you could
Instead
just
of knight takes e5, I think you just play rook takes c8,
Mm-hmm.
queen takes c8,
You're gonna
queen
win the
takes
queen.
c8, knight.
Yeah.
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 No. Yeah. Okay, that one too.
Yeah. You're correct. You're correct. I'm just realizing more and more that like this might be the best thing you have in every position. Like this could be better than winning a queen. The computer might pick this because this might be made in 7. I mean, there's literally nothing here. You've got bishop, queen, rook,
Knight.
and knight.
yeah.
Wow.
I
yeah.
bet if I turn on the computer, it's going to say mate. It's not going to say +7 or 13 or anything like that.
4 pieces by the king.
It'll probably be mate. I mean, F5 might be the, who knows, queen H5 and just mate, right? It just,
Yeah.
yeah. Mate in 5. Right? And this computer's not like the strongest, but if it says mate in 5, I don't think it's ever been wrong about that. So this is great, right? To realize like how we can really tear this apart here. This is an example that I learned something from. So, okay. So then, another branch would be this move here. Now let's see if we can beat this. I'm thinking the answer is, well, okay. I think I found the answer, but I'll give you guys another shot. So this weakens the E6 square, but what do? At least it doesn't let white play G6 and checkmate the same way.
Oh, I had a response for this line. I think it was just queen e6 check, but
Okay.
There's got to be more to it than that.
Okay. Well, I'll let you
okay.
refresh your variation in your head and look another move ahead.
Yeah, I feel like it was just queen e6 and then knight g6. It's a little tricky now because now that the F file's open, Black always has rook. Like when I move the knight, Black has rook takes f1 check.
Mm-hmm.
As a
right
in between.
He's your target, but you have to figure out your timing now that you're both looking at each other.
Okay, I think I've got it.
Okay, cool.
So I'm gonna play queen e6 check.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just looking at the king moves.
Fair enough.
So if king h8, I think I have knight takes g6 check.
Mm-hmm.
And then if pawn takes, I have rook takes f8 check, queen takes, and then rook takes c8.
I didn't realize that came with check. That's pretty important.
Yeah.
Right.
So the point of queen e6 is actually simply to set up a chance to move this knight with check, because you want to unveil this, but you don't want them taking on f1. That's the whole difference. So queen e6 is going to force a knight check. So.
And then on this one, I think I had knight h5 check.
Mm-hmm.
Other knight.
Oh, sorry.
That knight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to still have knight takes g6 check.
If they came this way?
If they came that way.
Okay, cool. Once the file's open, you don't
way.
need it. They win equally, just so you know. Like, they win just
Oh, yeah,
the same,
sure,
right?
fair enough.
Yeah.
But
it felt better to get that other knight doing something.
So you get this one here. Yeah, you get them all involved. Let's say they take.
Oh, the knight just take. Yeah, knight takes there.
Here.
And the same stuff.
Okay. So that's how we beat f takes g6. Is we just need to set up one of these knight moves with check, and it turns out that we can.
So then the only thing I was still stuck on was rook f7. But I don't...
Okay.
Just...
Well, your whole plan was to eliminate this rook to take over here, so...
Yeah, but I'll just take it then. So just rook takes c8 check. Or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I was just...
And now that this rook can't take on f1, presumably every move of your knight is also winning right here.
Yeah.
As well as rook takes c8.
So what if none of those moves?
So neither recapture works for black. We're cracking through. But you guys already see that if there were a knight on c5, it would not be so simple, right? And a lot of it's based on this tactic of this rook here, which is sort of cutting both ways, right? Like black's taking advantage of white's rook on c4, but white can also take advantage of the rook on c8 in some cases. Just like in this variation, you see that, you know, if I play knight g6 or knight e6 at the wrong point here, the opponent takes here with check and escapes everything, right? But if I can set it up right, I can take advantage of the same opposition between those pieces. So all that's left is for you guys to figure out how to win against the full acceptance of the rook here. Okay, and Finity had some fairly promising variations with pawn takes f7, rook takes f7, queen e6. We needed to move this rook. I played rook c2 before, which was stupid because after rook c2, I mean, I'm sacking this knight. That was dumb of me to pick that square for the rook. White doesn't have that much to prove if that knight's hanging. And you don't have to take it right away. You could do the same thing that Finity wanted to do, which is threaten f7, but the knight's always hanging. Okay? So that was a dumb move. So we have to play rook c3. It defends the knight and attacks all of these pieces here. So this is definitely a testing move. Now you really got to prove what you're up to. So what are we up to, Finity?
Oh, I want to just play knight g6 and start going after the pinned piece.
All right. going for this with checkmate, stopping queen f8 as the defense. Only move queen e8.
Now I'm looking at rook takes and then knight takes e7. I don't know what the follow-up is to those moves.
Mm-hmm. You know, if you'd played g6 before you went for this whole mechanism, then basically advantage would be you wouldn't have this pawn, and you could win with knight e5, pawn takes e5, queen g6 check. King f8 to keep defending the rook, bishop h6 mate.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if we like
g6.
If we do this, I mean, the main move is going to be this, right?
Yep.
Now you play the same move from before, threatening queen f7, mate in 1. So there's not time for them to look at sacking the rook and doing counterplay. That's mate in 1. So then we're looking at here. It's not mate in 1 anymore, so we can look at rook takes bishop here, right, if we want to get exhaustive about what's going on.
Yeah.
But the first point of this variation is check here. There's no rook g7 because of queen e8.
Yep.
If king here, rook takes f7. If king here, bishop h6.
G6 is so strong in this. Just
yeah.
period.
It's called removing your opponent's pawn cover from their king.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's one of the basics of attacking is just these kind of like annihilations of the pawn cover. Now, normally what you would do is you would sack like a knight or a bishop on their g6 pawn to break through. Here, we're just taking with a pawn while sacking the piece over on c4. But the effect is basically, it's like the same thing. It's just weird. Like you sacked your piece on the other side of the board because they weren't recapturing a pawn instead of you playing bishop takes g6 or knight g6 or rook g6.
I just remembered what I saw on this line, and this was after queen e6 pinning.
Mm-hmm.
White or black could play queen c8.
Oh, what a move.
To defend the rook, and yeah, so I had seen this.
That's a devastating defense. Yeah. That's a refutation, right?
Yeah.
We need something else. Good spot. So in this position here, it probably still would have to be g6, right?
Yeah, g6.
Even with the rook here, right? So it'd have to be g6. And on rook g7, let's say that queen e6, queen c4 is going to be really good.
Yep.
Right? It's sort of like the knight on b3 is hanging at the end if white needs a tempo. Knight e6 is threatened, hitting the queen and the rook. It's just, I mean, and threatening rook f8. So everything's flowing for white. So let's imagine that black has to take this thing. And now we have to choose between knight g6, queen g6, etc. Or maybe even knight h5, who knows, right? Just stopping rook g7. Knight g3 to h5. Queen e6 now, queen c8.
I think we can play queen takes check. If he blocks the rook, we can still have our fork, but now g3 is kind of...
There might be counterplay. So where's the king go? h7 maybe?
Probably not the f file.
Yeah. We're thinking ixnay on the f file. So let's go here. This requires precision again, right, Baron? It's like we're pretty close here, but we need to be precise.
Oh, I see it.
Anybody see something? Yeah?
Yeah, I see something. So
Okay.
knight h5.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking too. My instincts
Yeah.
tell me this is going to be good.
Yeah, if bishop takes, then queen h5, followed by queen takes g7 is
Wait, if
mate.
bishop takes where? G3?
G3, yeah,
Then this?
that's mate. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, so this unveils queen h6 as a huge threat. It also has the idea of eliminating this rook and bringing this rook to f7, just bringing more and more pieces. You could even play rook f7 without trading this for the knight. Remember, we've got, we're just overwhelming the defenses here. We've got queen h6, and we've got queen takes c4 threatened as well to just catch up on material.
Yeah.
So, to me, it looks pretty bad for black. Right? Here's another sample variation. They take this with check. That's actually not a very helpful move for black because, now white doesn't have to spend a move playing knight takes g7.
Yep.
If you come take the knight, then there's check and mate with queen g6 to g7 or h6 to g7. If now we save this piece, white will still have rook f7. And after like this, there's queen h6. And after this move, then the queen goes to h7. Just too many pieces and too many weak squares for black because there's just... because now there's one piece still covering a square or two. So that deals with rook takes knight. I mean, queen c8 was a great defense before. Probably now that white's got a square for the queen, it's not going to be enough. But maybe it's a little interesting.
Yeah.
Probably have to take it, right? And then look for time to bring this knight to f5 or h5 or the rook to f7. This is not guaranteed that this is going to work. Not at all. Nor is it guaranteed to fail. We'll see. Play queen h3 to try and hamper white. What else? Not much else to do. Those knights are too far away, right? Like in an end game when your opponent's got a passed h pawn on h6 and you're like, yeah, knight b3 is not going to get there.
Wait, can we just play bishop h6 here?
We could maybe. Yeah, it's black's move.
Oh, it is.
I was just struggling to find like a very helpful defensive move. Like they're just so far away, it's almost pointless to move towards the scene, right?
Yeah.
So I think maybe queen h3.
But knight f5.
Right, and then knight f5. And
black has no checks.
He's got to play like queen h7 or something, and knight e7 will probably do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then just queen there.
Yeah.
That'll do it.
That'll do it.
That king's in hell. Okay, well, probably there was no defense for black here. We're threatening rook f7, knight f5, knight h5, and bishop h6, and I didn't really see any helpful moves either. So which means black's probably 2 or 3 moves away from a defense.
What else can we try?
That was a pretty instructive variation as well here, right? We played g6. We're down a whole rook. But we just spent our time making one more pawn trade, right? Just trading that g pawn for the h pawn. And then this was a good move. Without this move, we might have been in trouble here. I mean, black's pieces don't even look that badly placed, right? That's part of the weird thing about this. It's like they're semi-active. They're just not covering the king. And white really needed a good move here, but I guess we found it. With this, yeah.
Queen. So
queen f5 might have also worked out.
I was looking at, so after knight h5, queen to h8 as a response for black.
Okay, sorry. In
Yeah, right
Talking
here.
about
Queen,
after.
queen to h8 right here.
oh, right away here.
Yeah. I mean, we
Gotcha.
just win our rook back.
Right, so we could get this
That's
rook
always
back, but we probably want to do this, right? We probably want to take the one that's actually defending the king first. So the queen can't get out of the corner because of rook f7.
Yeah.
And on bishop g7, now like these pieces are safe from that rook and bishop that we're attacking g3. We collect this, hitting the knight, and then just go back to winning however we like.
Yeah.
So, it's surprising how dangerous this is after g6 here, right?
Yeah. Wish I'd seen g6 in my calculations.
Yeah. Now, the line that I'd looked at more is this one, taking here, but it's very similar because we follow up with g6. Now, my first instinct was to play king h8 to try and hide behind the pawn.
Yep.
But we could also try taking it if you like, but let's try this first. g6. You may even wonder, like, what's white even threatening?
At bare minimum, we're gonna get our rook back.
Yeah, we're not like,
but
we're not really attacking anything at the moment.
Yeah.
But okay, so one thing to recognize is that if pawn takes g6, knight g6, black's getting beat down.
Yep.
So that's the first thing, right? So then once we recognize that, realize that maybe g7 is going to become white's threat. Or pawn takes f7 and then knight g6. So I think that the most likely next move from white is knight g3 to h5. Taking control of g7.
Yeah. Keep looking at bishop. Bishop takes f4 in a lot of these lines.
You can't really do bishop f4 because of this. Right? Well, I mean, I suppose it's not like we're up a rook. It's not like we can't do something like this for black.
Oh, I was looking at queen h5 check a second there.
Instead of taking the rook?
Yeah, oh no. Well, yeah, they're annoyingly getting away, it seems.
They might. It's close. But I think just taking this rook is not going to lead us astray.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, our risk here is going to be really minimal for white. I'll probably lift a rook. So are we down a pawn for white, basically?
Yeah. Well.
And threatening.
Down 2 pawns, but.
Rook f5 to h5.
Take white in this position.
You'd take white?
Yeah.
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 I think there's a chance black can sack the queen and not get mated. So if we turn on the engine, it'll say +7 or 8 instead of mate in 5. But I do think black's done. Just finished.
Yeah, I don't see how he stops queen h5 outside of like rook c5.
Yeah, I'm anticipating something like queen g7, queen h5, king g8, rook g4. And even after trading your rook for the queen, white's got knight f5 with, some mating threats coming again. So I don't think it can be taken, but white's idea is basically going to be to play knight h5, threatening g7. and hoping to make black take on g6 and play knight g6 check. So,
Makes sense.
any bright ideas for black?
Well, no, never mind.
Rook e4. We could just take it with the
Look,
knight.
I looked at Rook G8 for a millisecond.
Rook g8, yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I don't think that accomplishes very much. Actually loses the queen, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe bishop g7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I probably want to come attack that square with this knight, right?
Yeah.
Actually, maybe now I should go for knight g6 check. What do you think? Because with the bishop on g7, knight g6, king h7, queen h5 is mate.
Yeah.
Wait,
And
say
we're
that
probably
again?
threatening knight e6 here. Like if black plays this great defensive move from before, we just do this, threatening queen g7, and I don't know, kind of locking black out, defends this.
He's got to play. Oh, he's got to deal with the mate.
Yeah.
How does he deal with the mate?
Yeah.
He's got to move the bishop.
Got to move the bishop somewhere.
Wait, what was the refutation if we go back a couple moves of rook takes when the knight was still here? So rook takes f7.
Right here?
Mm-hmm. I couldn't hear what you said. Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then not to be too flippant, but it's a little bit whatever once we get here. Right? Like whether our next move is knight e7 or knight e5 or knight f5 or...
Yeah, one of these things you just figure out what to do when it happens.
Right. Or like bishop h6 even, attacking g7 because if the king takes queen h5. This one here is going to be mate if I turn on the computer. So yeah, so just knight g6. Uh-oh.
So king h7, queen h5, check. Bishop blocks. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, order matters.
Sometimes that little step makes it easier where you push them back first. But honestly, I mean, your way. You can also just creep in just fine. Or in this position, you could have just opened up this.
It's just kind of mean to your opponent.
We don't play chess to be nice to them.
It's true.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I'm not really sure what defense black's supposed to play here, but I think white's more or less winning.
Yeah.
I don't know. So here's a practical question. How much of this would you have wanted to have calculated in advance and seen in specific variations before you sack the rook on c4?
Right. So this depends on your instinct. If your instinct told you this were right, if you were comfortable with this kind of idea, if it just kind of like popped up to you as plausible and then you're like, oh yeah, I'm trading their last pawn, yeah, this king can't be defended, then you don't have to calculate as much. For me, where this goes completely against my instincts, this particular one, I would have to calculate relatively much more in order to feel confident, right? So that's like the big thing is like what you don't have in instincts, you have to like make up with calculation, right? What you don't have in calculation, you have to try and make up with instincts. And they don't replace each other. I mean, sometimes you just can't solve something because you don't have instincts, and all the calculation will never get you there. And other times you can't solve something because you've got the instinct, but you just don't have the calculation, and you just can't go for it. You just can't figure it out. So they don't always replace each other, but they do assist each other in a lot of situations, and that determines how much you have to calculate, right? So like, for example, let's look at this position here. Is this a good position to stop calculating for white? I mean, with the experience we have now, maybe. But for me, you know, a week ago before I'd seen this position, or whatever, 2 weeks ago, no. Like, when I considered this, I had like no clue if this was just like a joke, like -4, like zero compensation, or if it was somehow like a good attack, just enough. The thought that it's basically crushing, very far from my thoughts. So I would have to calculate like crazy. I would have to calculate several moves past this. In the bishop f4 line, I would be able to stop. Yeah, I would say like basically bishop f4 can't be done. G7's enough. You know, and then the weird thing is I struggled to find defensive moves for black, but I don't believe white's position. So then I'm like very slow to generate the variations. So I'm sitting there thinking like, I can't do this. If I had some defenses for black to calculate, then I could calculate them and be like, wow, I beat that defense. Wow, I beat that defense. But I'm sitting here kind of spinning my wheels personally with a position like this.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, there's no way this works, but I have no idea what black does. So...
Yeah, that's some of the problems I have. Is it feels like it's crushing, but I just can't find good moves for black. So I'm just worried that I'm overlooking something, or
yeah.
Like I have definitely had the experience where I've had a position kind of like this, where black just hides behind the white pawns and oops, it's all over.
Yeah. Yeah. Oops, they hide. It's very, very tricky working with a traitor pawn like the one on h7. And, you know, actually, even here, Finity had my normal instinct, which is to take the pawn on f7, not the pawn on h7. I'm so used to people hiding behind that pawn that I usually take the f pawn instead of the h pawn and then follow up with g6, trying to crack the last bit of it. And it looks like we were able to win with Finity's move. Pawn takes f7 as well. But I think the solution in the book where I got this only gave the g takes h7 line as being like good for white. And I don't remember what all variations it had and I had, because it was, you know, 2 weeks ago that I did this. But yeah, I can say like hg, knight g6, that line there. You know, you can stop this line when you see the rook f8 idea. You can probably stop this variation here, or here. Not with like 100% confidence you're winning, but like at this point your calculation's gotten far enough that your instinct can take over and say, this is certainly reasonable. Between gf7, rook f7, queen e6, like I've got enough for a knight on b3 here. So that's about how far you would have to calculate hg6 in a game. Probably because you're a little bit nervous. You'd look at that g6 move, another move or two, another minute or two, but you are trying to learn where you can cut down on that a little bit. I understand. That's why you're asking me about it. And I would say that after g6, it's probably far enough, but with that disclaimer that for everybody, the distance that they have to calculate depends on when their instincts start to kick in. or their ability to evaluate a position.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't have calculated all the way out to when the rook was on g7 and the knight was on h5.
Right. And then what else? The fg6, queen e6, you have to see that you're getting a check. This one you just have to like finish. It doesn't have as many branches, but you have to finish it. And then this is the more speculative line. And you probably don't have time to calculate gf and gh at great length. So you probably pick one based on instinct and try and make it work for a little bit. See where you get. This one here. How do you feel about this if black takes the pawn? I feel a bit better about this. How far would I calculate this? If the king comes back, I've got mate. I would notice that. If the king comes this way, I would notice that I've got mate here. That's a good place to stop that variation. So then it's, I guess, here. I'm already feeling very promising about this. I would calculate a little bit more, but the fact that I just took on g6 with check and there's nobody in front of him, I'm feeling good. We can win back our rook here. Oh, you're now silent for some reason.
It's all right. With stuff like this, it's easier for me to calculate because there's no quiet little moves you have to insert, which gives black an opportunity to find some defensive resource.
Right.
But I'm finding what throws up my calculations is when you need to insert a quiet little attacking move or a building move to really bring them down.
In this case, I think it was g6. That was
right.
the spot
it's that you're going to have time to just trade these pawns and then generate threats. Like, we're not even going to threaten something after we lose this rook. We're going to finish taking away the pawn cover, and then we're going to come flooding through with, like, 2 knights and a queen against just not a comparable force. But yeah, it's very confusing. So on king takes h7, g6, that wasn't too hard, right? That's a shorter calculation, relatively. I mean, it's not easy or anything for someone at 1800, but as far as how far to calculate, it was a bit shorter. And this is where it's just like, I mean, for me, this is just, I'm like, oh God, what is this doing or not doing? I just don't know.
Yeah.
And yeah. Okay. So that was the first 15-minute segment of our lesson, was to go over this homework problem. Now we've got 6 games of affinities that I wanted to go over with you tonight. We'll maybe like adjust our expectations to 3 out of 6 or something. You guys have another 30-40 minutes in you?
Yeah, this got me fired up.
You're fired up. You're strong.
Yeah, I drink my tea. I might make another one. I'm ready to go.
I'm really impressed, you guys. Your staying power, like being like time zones after me. But wow. Okay, let's do it.
I'm on leave this semester, so I don't have to worry about work so much tomorrow morning.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
I just have a sleep condition, so this is my normal schedule.
All right. Well, let's get into some of those. I'll just, for the second exercise I sent you, say that basically you nailed it. So good job.
Thanks.
For Baron. He asked for a second one, Infinity. You were playing a tournament, so
yeah,
that counts.
I was wondering. I was like, I didn't get a second one, and I was like, he must have asked for another one. Yeah, that was a good one. I like that position.
Okay. All right, so we're only doing the opening phases, by the way. So it's not we're not going to do a 50-move analysis 6 times in a row. All right, so we get this sort of semi-Tarrasch / Tarrasch / Nimzo / Panov Botvinnik attack. This is one of the most...
Do you want to invite?
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
I don't think I'm in it.
Good idea.
If not, I know which game you're talking about though, because
Yeah.
my opponent told me that it was a Tarash afterwards. I was like, oh, okay, because I have no idea.
All right. So yeah, so this position here is one of the most like transposed to from high quality opening positions in all of chess. Like if you wanted to study opening theory in one position that would apply to the most possible like games you ever played, I might say this exact position here
Okay.
would be like the most fruitful because it could come up with white or with black in the Nimzo, with white or with black in the Tarrasch defense, with white or with black in the Panov Botvinnik. Yeah, this is a great one. You can get it out of a symmetrical English move order. You can get it out of a Kali system. Like, so yeah. All right. That said, we get this move here from Aaron. What do you think of this, Finity?
I was kind of happy about this move.
Good.
Because
if he didn't play it, would you maybe have put your bishop on g5?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I wasn't super like I have to have my bishop on g5
Right.
and my game's over, and I felt like it was kind of like, I mean, it's got a purpose, but it didn't really like affect. At this point, I didn't really have a plan, to be honest. I was just surviving the opening.
Oh man,
good moves.
That's the problem. You were just surviving, not thriving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
dude, I've coached you on the opening. You should be ready to outplay people in the opening. We got really far. We got really far. Okay, so anyway, h6 is not one of the a6, h6 moves that are like 100% pointless. Right. Where I just say like, okay, completely pointless move, time to win because you're white.
yeah.
But I would be happy to see it because it's clearly a bad move. It's just not the end of the world. Okay, so you responded by developing your bishop to a different good square.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Nice. They castle. All right. Your choice here, a3, making the bishop decide. What do you think of this position? Like h6 was mildly not the best, but not terrible. So your move for white. Any thoughts of what's best here? Whether you've got an edge, like is there any logical way to take advantage of this situation?
Not that I saw.
No?
No, I didn't. I mean, you mean is there like an immediate threat that I can
I mean, not necessarily like a threat, but I mean, any way to make your position good?
Just continue my development.
Okay. So where are you going with your pieces? What are you trying to do with them? You're not just plunking them on random squares. Every piece has a meaning.
Right. So I kind of want to take that half-open file. So something like rook c1 or queen c2. Queen c2 is probably better, but I think it might be tactically wrong right now because of d takes c4.
You're worrying about this guy?
d5.
Good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which I feel like that's the reason I played a3. Because if he takes, then it'll be defended, and now I can play queen c2 and then rook c1.
So a3, you would have been happy to take your opponent's dark square bishop here, right?
Yeah.
And whether or not they take on c4, your d pawn is super solid. You've got the bishop pair. This is blocked in. Their remaining bishops, not even their good bishop. So you're just very happy here, right?
Yeah.
What if they retreat? What have you gained by playing a3? In other words, they played bishop d6, but we could also consider bishop e7. Is this bishop worse or better here than it was before?
I'd say better. It's better there now.
Okay. So what did you gain from a3 if your opponent's piece goes to a better square?
Uh, nothing.
Okay. Okay. So we don't like
Yeah,
a3.
yeah.
Okay. Like you, I would love for my opponent to take the knight on c3. But attacking it when it's got good squares to move to is not a way to achieve that trade, right?
Right.
Your opponent's only going to make the trade on c3 if they disagree with you about the positional choice here, right? The value of the bishop versus knight in this position and the pawn structure change.
Right.
I think we won't find many people to disagree with us about bishop takes c3 being pretty happy for white here. So your opponent's going to retreat. Okay, so let's say we want the opponent to take on c3. Got any other ideas?
To try to get him to take on c3.
Sure. I mean, if that's one of the things we like, yeah. Is there any way to force them? a3 doesn't seem to do it.
Is there?
What?
I don't think there is a way to force that.
Okay.
Unless I'm missing something.
All right. Let's tag Baron in for a second, see what Baron's got in the opening. I've never given Baron an opening question before. See any way for white to make an advantage here?
The only thing I was sort of thinking about was playing c5.
Okay.
But
and why were you thinking about that?
Because then I could play a3,
mm-hmm.
and then I think that's going to be good for me because then I get a3. And if they don't take on c3, then I'll have b4, b5 ideas.
Yeah.
And then just start rolling them on the queen side.
Paul, I imagine that's something that you would like to have too, right? a3, b4, b5.
Yeah, I didn't really think about the advantages I'm getting with the pawns rolling forward. I just was like, well, I don't see the difference between him trading for my bishop on c7 versus me trading for the bishop on d6.
Right.
And this in this line I lose that half open file that I get with rook c1. So maybe it made more sense.
You wanted this. The nice thing about this move is you also don't have to play a3, b4. You can lodge your bishop here. You can play knight b5 and leave this bishop stranded in your area. So here's the thing. One of the goals or one of the options in this pawn structure for white is to trade. That's always one of your options.
I was looking at that when you were asking if there was a way to force a trade.
You always have the option. It's always on the table. One of black's options is always to take on c4. They don't have to, but they always can.
Yeah.
Right? These lead to different structures, sometimes an isolated queen pawn if these pawns come off the board. Right? Sometimes both players having this isolated pawn. Sometimes the knight can take back, right? This is always an option to consider. And in different situations, you'll be happier or less happy to get them to play this or something like that. For example, if your opponent hadn't played h6 and you got your bishop to g5, that's going to be a position where you've got more pressure on d5, and black has to worry more about cd, ed as an option for you, followed by queen b3, and really pressuring d5.
Yeah.
Okay. If your bishop's not on g5 but on f4, then your opponent has to worry more about c5, because if let's say they didn't spend a move on h6 and we tried to grab this space proactively as white, right, with c5. Yeah. What counter does black normally look at to this? There's two, but
e5.
E5 is the big one, right?
Yeah.
Because now there's no pressure on their d5 pawn. right? And part of the point of this is that we've restrained this bishop. So the number one thing they want to do is see if they can just break down what you've built immediately, let their piece out. Let's see if it works, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't always work, but it's the first move to look at any time we're thinking about this c5 move. And, usually the variation goes d takes e5 and then the knight moves somewhere. d7 or g4 or something.
They don't have that when my bishop's on f4.
So when a bishop's on f4, that can be a great time to be seen as threatening c5. So the thing is, in the game, your opponent spent a move on h6, so you developed here instead of g5. They castle. This is the move you should really be looking at to potentially punish them, because you could grab the space for free. You're controlling e5 and d6. They're potentially weak on the dark square, so if they take this knight, great. If they don't take it, knight b5 maybe. So this is the move that would take advantage of your opponent's opening and give you a big advantage as far as I can see. Yeah?
Got it, yeah. Makes so much sense.
Okay. If they take, you're happy, right?
Always.
So the other way they can fight against this pawn structure is with b6 sometimes, right? So that's the other move to look at here.
Just bishop e6.
Maybe this, right? And here. And then maybe knight b5, threatening knight c7.
Yeah.
And the opponent's in a bit of a tough spot here. I mean, it's tactical, but you're threatening a3, b4 right now. And you're threatening knight c7. So black's definitely up against the ropes here.
Yeah.
I mean, and not to mention neither rook can move, so it's like it's hard to avoid this even. I would guess that black's best chance would be to somehow lose an exchange and not lose the bishop on b4. And they're not going to have any counterplay for it. They'll just be down in exchange.
Yeah. c5.
Okay. So that's how you could have gone for an edge in this game here. The other potential way to try and take advantage of h6 would be to set up like queen d2, bishop takes h6.
Right.
So that's how to play like an IQP version of this position here. And that would probably look like, rook c1. Building these pieces, right? Takes, bishop e7, queen d2. Something like that.
Yeah.
Or maybe like b6 trying to do this, as long as you don't have a tactic on this file, but they really have to be careful of d5 in a position like this, right? That's the kind of the danger if they go to the IQP position when you've put your rook on the c file and they haven't yet figured this out. But without getting into like a bunch of variations, like this is the other style of trying to make something out of what your opponent's done. You keep the tension, develop the rooks towards like c1, e1, d1, put your queen here. Maybe even in the face of a bishop on b4, you could play queen d2. So let's say I play bishop d7 for black. There may be positions where you can just play just straight queen d2 here, even though the bishop's looking at you, because there's no pressure against your knight. It's already defended a bunch. And you're just looking to play bishop takes h6. Like, you're telegraphing it.
Yeah.
And you're just using your space, right? That they just won't be able to bring enough pieces there, maybe.
It's going to play knight e4.
So that would be logically the ways to take advantage of your opponent's opening. And I would say here also, you could go takes, c5. The way you played. And then queen here. And now I would try to stop e5 with rook e1. and on b6 you've got b4 ready, and you've got knight b5 to d6 at some point. But before you, like, some people try and like sink this piece too fast here, and then the opponent just plays knight e8 and sort of like trades it, and you spend a lot of time bringing it to d6. So it's more important to first like control e5, play queen d2, play rook to b1 or c1, play b4. Like, you want to be really strong.
Right.
Let black play a move like a6 to stop knight b5 to d6 or something, right? And then their queen side's even weaker. Then you can play a4 b5 to open a file, or you can go knight a4 to b6 or something, right? You don't need to rush the knight. But if you can control e5, if you can set up this dark square pawn structure with the dark square bishop trade, you're in great shape here as well. So what happens is you just kind of play sort of simple moves throughout this game, right? Like here also, you could consider taking here. Play rook e1, which I think was actually correct, defending the pawn. Your opponent played here. And now you played b4, forcing them to like trade off and simplify, right? And that's really that, like, you're just trying to survive approach, that you're not trying to achieve so much. But this is a great chance to take and give your opponent a terrible isolated pawn, right?
Oh yeah.
Right? It's a bad pawn. You're threatening it. They go passive. You kick the knight. It goes somewhere. You do this. I mean, let's hurt this person.
Yeah.
Let's hurt them. You've got a good game, and you're just doing very, very straightforward kind of tradey moves here, right? You play b4, making them take, and here you have this move, which is good. Your opponent plays here, and oh, you didn't play knight d6 because of knight e5, huh?
Yeah.
You were being careful.
So like queen
That's
d3.
good. So you moved the queen here, 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 here. Yeah. Then you trade the queen. Yeah, you made so many trades, you still came out with an advantage, but I would have liked to see you, I don't know, I didn't get the feeling like you thought you were crushing your opponent.
No, definitely not. Not until like here.
Here. Not till you queened your pawn.
Yeah, so somewhere way down there. Where were we?
So to me, what really like sticks out in this game is like you've got this like amazing position, and I never get the feeling like you realize it. It never feels to me like you're trying to like push or try to like beat them.
Yeah, no, definitely did not feel that way in this game.
So there's a real lack of maximizing. This light squared bishop was like outclassed. You had a space advantage. You had an outpost. Your rooks are coming out better than theirs. Since your knight's covering c8, in this position, it would have been logical to put your rooks to the c file, anticipating they're going to like move the knight and try and play bishop c6, and you want to like try and win on b7 and c7, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Even a move like queen e4 can be evil, because their plan is knight e7, and now you're just going to take on b7. So now they have to come up with a plan. It's called prophylaxis, and just a move like this can be super rude. And then there's different ways you can play from here, because, by the way, you have the advantage on the queen side, in the center, and on the king side.
Yeah.
What Kostya called the best possible situation. Just yesterday on one of his shows, he was like, when you've got the advantage on all three sides, and your opponent just doesn't even really have anywhere to play. So you can go rook c1, rook c5, rook e to c1, and then play b5, rook c7. You can win this position with g4, g5. That's also completely winning. You could advance these pawns further. You could double on the d file.
Yeah, but even here, I didn't feel like I was winning, but I wasn't uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, at least you weren't like, oh God, I'm gonna lose in the opening. Like you were fine, but I could feel that you didn't realize how good this was all game. Like this
Yeah.
game, your opponent should never have gotten out of the opening.
Yeah.
So, you see there are some like plausible punishes to this h6 move, right? Like your opponent was actually under a fair amount of pressure this opening.
Yeah.
All right. Another one, round 3. Okay. Draw your attention to this position here. This is the most classical.
Got the invite?
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
You may have to keep in telling me that.
No worries.
Ow. Sorry.
Oh, I like this game.
Yeah, I thought your King Indian games, you were absolutely smashing people.
Yeah, I like King's Indian.
Yeah. So this position here is like the most classical position for the King's Indian, basically, right? And it's the start of a variation, which I believe is called the classical variation. I mean, neither Paul nor I are big like names people, but I mean, I know a bunch of moves here. I just don't necessarily know what everything's called, but I think this is kind of like the starting position for the most common way to get this pawn structure.
Yeah.
And I believe the common moves for white here are like knight e1, b4, and maybe knight d2 is another move.
Yeah, something so they can play f3, preparing for f5.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Okay, so your opponent plays h3. What is your read on this move? What are they thinking of? Is it good or bad?
So I actually just know this move in this position. This is just bad, I think. There's always ideas of bishop takes h3 in these positions.
Mm-hmm.
So white just never really wants to play h3, I don't think, in the King's Indian.
True.
But I don't know how to take advantage of it right away, or if there's a way. But I felt good about them having played this.
Yeah, I mean, the way to take advantage of it is obviously only going to have its repercussions down the road. Like, in a sense, right away, because you could play the best move, but, like, in a sense, not right away, because it's not like you're going to take on h3 for another 20 moves or something.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so this move here, you're correct that it's not good and that they shouldn't want to play it. However, your opponent did want to play it. So why did your opponent want to play it? What do they have in mind?
So I assume that not only does it prevent me from moving a piece of g4, but I think the main idea is knight h2 to g4 to trade things off on g4.
Okay, to trade off some pieces there.
And to move the knight out of the way.
So they were looking for an alternative way to bring this piece.
Yeah. Generally, I feel like when white plays h3 and has a knight on f3, that the reason that they're doing that is so that they can play knight h2 and then f4.
Okay.
That's what I see.
Baron, do you ever predict what moves your opponents are going to play in the opening?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But I usually do so when I find myself in a system or position I haven't really played too often.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So white plays h3 here. What do you think? What do you think they're doing?
My first thought was just they didn't want Paul to play bishop g4.
Okay.
Which I'm not sure if that was actually one of his ideas, because I thought he was going to do something like knight e8 and then f5.
You're correct. Yeah. Knight e8 and f5 is the main plan for black here, and what Paul would have done and did in this game. Paul, would you ever play bishop g4 here? I can't hear you if you're answering.
Oh, I am totally muted. I apologize.
Okay.
So yeah, well, another one of the things for the King's Indian is that you really don't want to trade off your light squared bishop. And so putting it on the diagonal with the bishop and the queen's kind of counterproductive.
Yeah. You don't want to
And
trade it for the knight, and you don't want to trade it for the bishop. So what is it doing there?
Exactly.
Okay. So white might be misreading what Paul wants to do. Like maybe white thinks he's going to throw a wild knight to g4 for no reason, or bishop to g4 to trade it, but he's certainly not going to. Most likely white had in mind what he did in the game, which is making space for the knight to go to h2. So he does this. What should black do here, given that white's playing h3 and maybe knight h2? Does that change anything about how you want to play here?
No, because I want to play f5, and f5 is going to prevent knight to g4.
Okay. Does it change at all whether you want to go knight d7, knight e8, or knight h5?
That's a tougher question.
Often it doesn't matter, right? Because you move the knight, you play f5, and you put it back on f6.
Right.
But I think you've played the King's Indian enough to have seen that it goes to different squares sometimes while waiting for f5.
I think you're wrong on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it always goes to e8.
Yeah.
Okay, so why would you not play knight e8 here? What about h3 has changed your move?
Well, okay, so if he plays g4 here, it prevents that. Kind of.
Yeah, black's got that covered 4 times. That's maybe black's best defended square on the board, so there's no preventing it.
Yeah. What is different about 98 versus, I mean, other than, okay, so h5 can be attacked immediately by g4.
Mm-hmm.
And the other move blocks bishop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's what makes knight d7 bad. It's hard for me to say exactly why I'd play knight e8 over knight h5, because even if he pushes.
Well, actually, in this position, you played h6. I'm curious why you didn't just play knight e8 if that's your favorite.
I did play h6. Oh, why did I play h6?
Yeah.
There was a deep reasoning behind this. Hold on, now I have to remember this game. I wish I'd written down my analysis, but
okay. Well, if you don't remember, it's fine. We can talk through these.
I didn't want bishop to g5 to come in and then to pin the other knight on e7 to my queen.
This. Do you care if your opponent trades this?
A little bit.
So, like, if I now played h6 and your opponent took here, you'd be unhappy that you gave them that chance?
Oh, no, not really.
No. They're going to be weak on the dark squares, right?
Yeah.
So just like you don't want to trade this, one of your reasons is for your attack, but there's also like a structural reason that this tends to be your good bishop.
Yeah.
And if you don't have it, then there's all kinds of different ways the game can open up, and then you're like, oops, I wish I had a light squared bishop defending e6 or something.
Yeah.
Their bishop is similar, right? I mean, you can even play h5, bishop h6, and they'll already start to feel like, this game's going to be hard to play because I can never play rook c1, and I can't put my queen on any of these squares in the middle of the board. So bishop g5 is not good for white, basically for very similar reasons to bishop g4. They don't want to trade it, and that's like a trading square. You can play f6, you can play h6.
Yeah.
And they won't want it. And it's not amazing here to go tuck the bishop this way, which I can explain if either of you disagrees. But do either of you think that this might make sense for white? Or
Mm, no.
It's not helpful for white,
No.
right?
Oh, I was gonna say it makes sense because he doesn't want to lose his bishop, but
Right.
it's not good for white because he's
Okay,
going
yeah.
to trap his bishop.
He shouldn't have brought
Yeah.
his bishop to g5 if the plan was to go to
Right.
h2, right?
Yeah.
While giving black time to move things forward on the king side, which black actually wants to do. So this was an unnecessary move for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, there's a thing here, which is that if your opponent's going to play knight h2 and f4, you actually want to play f5 as fast as possible. In general, I mean, f5 is like your plan. You want to play it as fast as possible.
Right.
There are situations where one might delay a tiny bit. Like here, if white plays, what's a move where you might delay it? Queen b3 or something. This is like a bad move, but it'll just show an idea that here, this move is annoying. Because white's about to like fight you for these light squares. They're just going to plop the knight on e6 and then say that your light squares are weak.
Yeah.
So if your opponent like waits around with the knight on f3, you'll probably play h6 before you play f5 actually. The important thing is if they move the knight away in order to play this move or this move, you now don't need a tempo for h6. So you can now play this one move faster and they don't get this or this before you start to pressure.
So
Okay.
h6 was unnecessary
Yeah.
for multiple reasons.
Yeah, it's important
One,
to
because it's pretty clear that his plan is probably knight h2.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the only situation in which I would want to have played h6. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
And if they're not going to play knight h2, if h3 was just they were afraid of something on g4 and they just thought they'd weaken their king side already. And I say this because like you guys now know from like all our work on attacking that like when you're attacking the king, you might spend 3 or 4 moves just trying to get your opponent, like trying to do something annoying enough that your opponent moves upon one step, right? And then you have to refocus your whole attack and try and get them to make some other little concession in that area, right?
Yeah.
So great. If they just played h3 just because they were so scared of bishop g4, knight g4, great. You forced a weakness like the easiest you ever did for building up an attack later, right?
Yeah.
And you might still have to play h6. But if they're going for like knight h2, f4 or something, then you want to play f5 as fast as possible. So that becomes important, that move order.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is if your opponent's going to play f4, your knight would actually be a little bit better on one of these two squares, where it either fights for f4 or e5.
Okay.
So when you played h6 and your opponent played knight h2, I mean, now they're really getting closer to telegraphing f4. And at least back when we were working on the opening, if I asked you why white played knight h2, f4 would have been one of your ideas of what your opponent might want. And if that's the case, then this move makes a lot of sense because you can go here, 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 and here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just in general, it's going to be nice to have the knight on this square. I mean, you played the game just fine with the like 2 pawns next to each other, but another way to play a position like this would be if you set up this whole thing, you can also do it with 2 knights on those squares instead of pawns. I mean, I don't know which is better, and I think it depends, but it's just like another option that you definitely have.
Yeah.
Right? Like either way is probably playable. But so knight d7 gives you that extra option compared to the knight on e8.
Right.
So I think that you lost a move here, and then given that f4 was coming, you were too... I guess you only really thought of knight e8 as being one of your options, so you weren't weighing it against, like, should I be on h5 or d7 or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you do, in the future, consider it, there are some situations where knight d7 is going to be better, and they're going to involve knight e5 or knight c5 being.
So what it actually
Like the
was,
moves.
David, I played h6 so that I could play knight h7 because I wanted. No, I'm just
You
kidding.
wanted a fourth option for the knight. Yeah, you were
Yeah,
weighing it.
exactly.
Yeah. And knight e8 is better in variations where white's going to be attacking c7 really soon,
Mhm.
or d6. Like if they're already playing c5, or you can't stop c5, then sometimes you go to e8 to just start defending these two squares.
Right.
If you can stop c5, sometimes you go to d7 to control that square.
Yep.
Or I mean, you can't stop it, but if it like slows it down in a way that's annoying to white, right? So you should definitely have knight e8 and knight d7 both up your sleeve as options, and even knight h5 is interesting in some positions. And actually, the move h3. If we talk about reading things, the move h3 makes knight f4 better.
Right.
You already know why.
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Two reasons. So one is the knight on f4 is in good shape against this pawn structure. Like let's say I don't know, this, and knight f4. Against this pawn structure, the knight is in good shape against it because they can't play g3 without losing h3 often. This comes a lot in very simplified endings. Like just like a knight and rook versus knight and rook. You put a knight on a square like this, attacking these two pawns, and it's quite annoying.
Yeah, I definitely have fallen victim to this a lot.
Yeah, and so also
And this,
with the bishop, right? It's like consistent that this is going to be annoying for white.
yeah, and so this is. It always feels weird because I'm like, oh, I play bishop or knight f4 and I'll trade the bishop off, but white doesn't want to do that, and I think that's the key thing because of the pawn structure in the center.
It's got a big cost for them as far as this bishop, and in general the dark squares. That was their good bishop. And guess what the move h3 also does in general? Weaken dark squares.
Right.
So everything about the move h3 makes knight h5 like better than normal as an option.
Yeah.
So right away here where, we were saying like not h6, why didn't you just start making your knight move? It's possible that after just seeing h3 that your best move is actually knight h5 and just coming straight for f4.
Yeah.
If I hadn't played the move h3, let's say I played a normal move here like bishop e3, and now you go knight h5, rook here, knight f4, bishop f1. This would be a normal way to try and handle this knight for white, is you don't trade it, you skip out of the way of it, you try and leave the knight here so it stops black's own stuff a little bit maybe. But you also notice that in these positions I always have g3 as an option.
Yep.
I mean, I don't have to play it. Again, I'm not trying to play a lot of moves with my pawns on this side of the board, but it's a relevant option at any point, and black's got to be careful that they make sure the knight always has an escape, and anytime they play f5 or whatever they play, they have to calculate g3. It's like hanging over black. So that would be the normal way to handle it. And so when we see this early h3, gosh, it makes me think that knight h5 to f4 might be pretty good here.
Yeah. Even and g4 just doesn't same situation as before, but worse.
Yeah, g4 I'm again happy to see. I'm planning to play f5 or h5 and just fight on the king side. I'm pretty confident. Yeah. And I'll just say in general, like in these positions, maybe sometimes your opponent like tries to win this pawn. You'll usually have compensation. Even if this pawn's not on g4, which is obviously going to make my kingside prospects even better. But even if this pawn were on g2, let's see, knight h5. Let's do this. So the pawn's still here. White goes to try and win this. f5. Queen here takes here. Even something like this, I mean, it's just often like just a terrific position. Even if you just straight up lose that f pawn. So yeah, just an extra idea to consider.
Great. Yeah, I'm just so used to 98. I never really put much thought into that move.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'm gonna invite you to one last board.
Oh no, not round 4.
Oh yeah.
All right.
This one wasn't pretty.
Have you already
All
seen
right.
all his games, Baron?
I flipped through them yesterday.
Nice. Awesome.
He shared his library here with me.
I'm loving that library feature.
Perfect. Okay. So, Paul, tell us about White's options in this position here.
Well, you can take the knight, which generally, wait, is this a Sicilian? Yes. Generally, you don't want to do. You don't want to allow knight to, for him to control d5 like that with a pawn. And knowing that, I still decided to take it because I thought that since my a pawn was already so advanced that I could have an interesting stronghold on b6.
You wanted to go a5, bishop e3, bishop b6.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And now what do you think of that idea?
Well, one didn't pan out. Well, I mean, it kind of did. I just missed the tactic. But overall, I don't know what am I really getting by having a bishop on b6? Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's an outpost, but it doesn't seem to help you, like, attack anything.
Yeah, it's a weird outpost, too, because my bishop has... I mean, it's not going to be able to move to a5, so I'm attacking c7, d8, and a7 on black's camp.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm on the same diagonal I would be on e3.
On e3, right. You haven't gained too much by being there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, oh man, I hate this game.
Okay.
But, yeah, I also had some... So this is the highest rated opponent for me so far in the tournament.
Yeah.
And I guess it was just like, oh, this guy's almost 1,800 USF, so I've got to not make the game familiar to him. And so I was trying to do something unique rather than playing for what was right.
Okay.
It made sense. Yeah.
What would you say makes sense here for White?
Probably bishop c4 or f3.
Okay.
And the two I'm looking at right now.
Right. Reading the board where the white piece is going to be good. I guess the knights are already good where they are.
Yeah.
Bishop.
Bishop on e3. That's why you play f3 to prevent knight to g4, and bishop c4.
Great.
Help controls d5. Because right now, like, kind of everything's fighting over d5.
Yeah. Those look like the best squares to me.
Yeah. Man, it was funny when I finished this game, I texted my work buddies. None of them play chess, so they just have to listen to me talk about chess. And I was like, my coach is going to be so disappointed in this game I just finished. And it was this one, yeah. I don't know. I don't know why I didn't play those or why I went for this weird nerves. Or I mean, I wasn't nervous, but I mean, the fact that he was, 200 points higher than me was weighing on me.
You had a thought that, about your opponent's strength, right? So
Yep.
that was having some impact on what moves you played. Generally speaking, it's best to stick to the moves that we think are good.
Blitz and bullet
more we
tomorrow
can, right?
night.
Right.
Be there or be square.
Versus like I think my opponent's better or worse at this thing or that thing.
Yeah, I made
Yeah.
a mistake twice in
So
this tournament.
playing to our strengths or what we know is usually going to be more important than trying to guess the strengths and weaknesses of an opponent that we don't even know. And then try to play to those. Even if you have time to prepare for an opponent and you think you guess their strengths and weaknesses, it's still often a mistake to do that versus playing to your own strengths and weaknesses because, I mean, I don't think many people at your level are that good at like profiling where like, and I know people with these classical tournaments that we run and they've got a week to play an opponent, they do like preparation, but like the profiles that you guys have each seen me do where I play through like 10 20 30 of somebody's games and figure out their strengths and weaknesses. I don't think necessarily that like an 1800 looking at another 1800's games is going to have an accurate profile of their opponent.
Right.
So I mean, it may help you like predict an opening, but if you start making different choices based on your opponent, it's often going to be a fairly random or extraneous factor.
Yeah, the 2 games I lost were based off of me trying to play against my opponent rather than play the game.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Okay. So let's say knight takes c6. Paul thinks it's a mistake. What do you think, Baron?
I think it's bad.
Okay. Fair enough. What about a5? Let's say you're black and someone plays a5 against you here. What do you think?
I think you just take it.
Yeah, I don't understand why they're just chucking their a pawn to certain doom. I don't.
To certain doom. Okay, so to you it looks like that pawn is in danger.
The
If they play
A5.
a5 here,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. So if you hadn't heard that Affinity had in mind to play bishop e3 to b6, would you guess that was White's idea, or would you just think like, I don't know what they're doing?
I would think I don't know what they're doing and it seems bad, so
Okay.
I'm just going to bring my pieces out and hopefully prove that it's bad.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. What would you play here for black next? We're gonna see if he can like read into the ideas on this board and punish your opening at all, Paul.
Okay.
So if White were to play a5, I would probably try and think more in an actual game, but
Mm-hmm.
the most trying thing would be just knight takes a5.
Oh wait, you guys aren't on my board.
Oh, okay.
Are we not?
It doesn't look like
So I'm
it.
looking at on move 6, where Black just played knight c6,
Uh-huh.
and then
Okay, so you're
Move
looking
7,
at the
you're
right
suggest-
game, but I don't see you in my analysis board.
Oh, the servers did just restart.
Oh, that must be what happened. Okay,
Yeah.
hang on. Let's see if we can get back into the same board. Do you guys see a new invite or?
No, I'll try
No.
rejoining live chess a second.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see it in there.
Okay. So he traded the knights before playing a5 Baron. So the
Oh,
pawn's
okay.
not
So you're looking at
the pawn's not
after-
straight up doomed. Yeah.
okay.
I realize now you're looking at a move before me.
Um,
Maybe I need to refresh my live chess as well. All my analysis boards are gone. Ah. All right. So much for taking the time to enter them in advance.
Thought it was a trick question. I was like,
yeah, it's like,
We
how am
take
I going
that
to get
pawn.
squashed? It's like, I don't see it. But do you often get intimidated or, think about how you're going to play based on when you see the pairings and see the person's rating fall?
oh yeah.
Because one thing I found helpful just to help me be more objective was to do my best not to look at their rating. Just try and look at the name and the board number and say, okay, I'm playing Bill on board 5. Because if I try and look at Bill's last name, then I'm going to probably see their rating. And I remember
Gotcha.
one of the first tournaments I played at, I was playing what ended up being a national master, and he played a weird opening move I had never seen before, and I thought it was totally stupid. And I ended up getting, I think, a pretty good position, but then kind of unraveled towards the end of the game. But he ended up playing the Briar variation against Roy Lopez I played. And he played this weird knight back to b8. I was like, what the heck is that? What a stupid move.
Knight
I'm going to
b8.
destroy this guy. Yeah. I was like, what the heck was the point of that?
Yeah,
and
the
then
first
later
time I
he
saw
was
that
this
move,
is
I was pretty confused too.
it's like, that's a move? He's like, yeah, this is a well-known kind of thing. It's like, oh, I thought you were just doing something stupid.
Yeah.
I was like, no. I was like, well, okay, learned something.
Yeah.
Okay, so
All right. So a5 here. What would you think of this? What would you do about it? Would you see that white has the idea of bishop e3 to b6, maybe?
See, you did.
no, I'm sorry.
Oh.
I was thinking, probably not until they actually played bishop e3.
Okay.
And then I'd probably have to think about if I should play something like c5. But my first instinct was to probably play something like g6.
Right here.
Right.
Okay, so trying to get a nice diagonal for this piece and maybe converge on b2. So white would play bishop e3, and what would you do now?
Thinking maybe bishop e6.
Okay.
Because the bishop's going to come to b6, but I have plenty of time to just get out of the way, and then I can always threaten to do something like knight d7.
So you're going here?
Sure. Or was thinking maybe knight, or not that it matters too much, but maybe queen b8 right away.
Okay.
So that
Sure.
way I could play knight knight
Absolutely.
d7 and actually have a threat.
Yeah. Great. We're trying to see if you can punish white, so I'm going to definitely let you play whatever precise moves you want.
Okay. Bishop g7.
Okay, so you're not playing knight d7. You're going to get yourself coordinated.
Well, I was worried about a move like if I did knight d7 right away, queen d5, queen d4.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And I think I'll do knight d7 right away.
Okay. How do you think you're doing here?
Me?
No, Baron.
Oh, okay.
But you can answer too. That's fine.
I think I'm doing pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think white's pieces are developed to good squares. They spent a lot of time sticking this bishop on b6 only to have it get threatened with the loss of the dubious a5 pawn. So I'd be pretty happy. And I'm not too worried about a move like e5, since I'm doing an excellent job of controlling it right now.
Yeah.
And then also b2 is a problem, which then c3 would be a problem.
Play knight a4.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think it's going,
It's terrible.
Paul?
Not great. I mean, it's not that bad because now that I've played knight a4, I'm both defending b2 and continuing with my idea. I mean, I shouldn't say it's not that bad. I'm trying to get a pass pawn. That's my goal. So if he takes on that square and I can turn that square into a pass pawn, that was my goal, and I've accomplished my goal.
Right.
So I thought c5 as a way to prevent, way back when I was about to play bishop e3 as a way to prevent with the idea.
So you're reasonably
bishops.
happy with how things are going. You feel like, yeah, you spent some time on a5, but bishop b6 you didn't lose time because the queen moved.
Yeah.
And you're happy with what you've accomplished.
Yeah.
Okay.
All things considered.
So you're both feeling okay with this? Yeah.
I'm feeling like I successfully have executed a poor plan. Is kind of what I feel like.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, you stuck with it, and you're not ruined in any way. Looks pretty logical what you're doing. Yeah, you could play c3 next to fight against this bishop. I mean, I played the moves for you instead of you playing your own moves. It might also be logical to put the bishop on d3 instead of e2, so that in certain circumstances you could play queen e2 and bother that a6 pawn. Yeah. It might be one of the nice things about being strong on a5 and b6 would be to attack that. So what you're doing here is not illogical, right? The bishop e2 version of this, you also had another option here, which was just to come back to d4.
I looked at this one too.
At a time where knight e5 f4 seems to win for you. And if you get the dark squares like this, rook's hanging, they can't play queen b2. And then you do this. You can do this as well.
Yep.
So yeah, it doesn't look totally terrible for you. The amount of time you've lost is not excessive. On the other hand, I mean, it also has to be said that black developed all their pieces comfortably, right? As far as an open Sicilian goes, black has pretty decent central control, pretty solid position, developed all their pieces pretty actively. They were black in the Sicilian and you wasted one tempo, right? So, I mean, not wasted, but I mean, you spent a tempo, right? On a pawn move.
Yeah.
So, I mean, black's not going to be able to beat you on development if you waste one move as white.
Yep.
So that was interesting. I feel like black's moves were logical and white's were too, and you guys got a reasonable position out of it, right? So, yeah, I would love to. I would love to punish this move slightly as black, by saying it lost time, but it's not. It doesn't seem to be something where you can get anything too amazing out of it. Here, this would be the other big option, stopping the whole b6 thing. Then I imagine white switches to c4.
Yep.
And they get control over d5. Since you've played g6, it's not as fun to play e6. There's still going to be knight a4 b6 in some cases, even if the bishop can't get there. And so
Yeah, I think I thought if he played c5, I was going to play bishop to d2 so that I could play knight a4 in the game.
you want to play this? Oh, with bishop d2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after bishop e3 of c5, I was going to play bishop to d2.
Just straight back. Oh, you were really going to like rush for that square.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need to be a little more flexible to play different things on the board.
Okay.
So like here, the c5 move kind of weakened d5 while keeping you out of b6. So it might sort of make sense to completely shift gears.
Right.
You can still put your queen on d3, fight for control of these light squares, pressure a6. You can play knight a4 one day, and you don't even need a bishop on d2 to play it, actually. Like, I mean, I haven't rushed it, but if you play knight a4 tactically, this is not an issue.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The issue is that we need to, control the central squares as well before we go on adventures. So,
Yep.
protecting this, because I was going to play f4, but if you're not even going to play f4, you could also just play queen d3 in this position here. Instead of spending a move on h3. Again, moves only have like their meanings, right? I played h3 not because I was afraid of like knight g4, bishop f4, but because if I play f4, then this just destroys me.
Yep.
So I played h3 because I was thinking you could play with f4, and both of these moves could be interesting at some point. But we can also just play queen d3, defending these squares. Right here, maybe f3 would be needed. Maybe just rook e1. Well, it's hard for me not to play like h3, f4, but okay. We'll just defend this pawn, right? And now we're playing for knight a4, b6 this way.
Yep. So I guess my plan wasn't the worst plan in the world.
No, I mean, I would say it's like flatly not good, but it's positionally intricate, and it's not like stupid, right? It's hard to find the right moves for white or for black after this.
Yeah.
So with this way that it was played, this would be another version where I would prefer c5 over your opponent's retreat. Now at least they're not giving up d5. Generally speaking, when white trades early on c6, black's going to want one of these pawns to gain space and one of them to guard d5. So black usually chooses between c6 e5 or e6 c5.
Gotcha.
As a way to sort out the structure usually. But okay, so you played here and played this retreating move. Now basically you haven't lost anything with a5 because your opponent's played this retreating move.
Right.
You played queen g4 to make it hard for your opponent to castle and make things weird and difficult. d5. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, normally I would have just... things worked out for you somehow, but I would normally just be doing something like this, just...
Yeah.
Some more development.
I don't know why I was so tempted to play so crazy. I don't know. I don't know what it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I missed a key tactic a few minutes later.
Right. But I'm not worrying about that. I'm just worrying about the whole, like, what makes sense? What's the opponent going to do? What are you going to do? Right? Like,
Right.
was there a plan for where this piece was going to go? How do you feel about your opponent playing knight e5 and taking it? Was that something that made you not want to play bishop d3, or?
Yeah.
Because if so, like, queen g4 is not going to be worth preventing them from playing this if then you can never bring yours out, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, if we look at, where are things going, right? This wants to go here. This wants to go somewhere. Probably not c4 because of d5, right? So it's like this or this. I have to lay out where all the pieces are going. Yeah.
Even
Okay.
then, when I, like, towards later on in the game, after I missed the tactic, and I was still trying to just, like, force a win. Like, it was bishop h7 check. I know we're only going over openings, but
Right. You're really, really going for it here,
with this
which is
bishop
funny because
h7.
in, like, the games where you had a good opening, I felt like you didn't, like, push for it, and this game for some reason you were more trying to pressure your opponent, but there's not, like, a great basis for it because their position's pretty solid here, and they haven't committed any sins, so to speak, right? Like, this player, like, maybe they didn't need to retreat the knight from f6 to d7, but, like, at worst that was a trade for your a-pawn tempo. So so there's no particular reason to finish them off here.
Yeah, h4. I don't know. Can't explain this one. Also, the time controls were an hour 40. So not only was I playing quite insane, but it was an hour, I think it was hour 40, 100 minutes with a 30-second delay or 30-second increment. And this game was finished, I think I had like an hour 15 on my clock. And so did my opponent. His moves there.
Yeah. I mean, all of that sounds like nerves or jitters. Right? Every element of that, right? Playing fast, trying to win, trying to get them out of their comfort zone, thinking about their rating.
Yeah.
All of that sounds like nerves. I think part of it is, and this is a guess. You can correct me, or you might not know for sure or anything, but I think part of it is perhaps that I've told you that you're playing at, like, a 1750 to 1800 range.
So I felt like I had to win.
your rapid rating on chess.com has gone up and seems to suggest that. But on the cross table, your USCF is the old 1550, your opponent's 1750. But this is an opponent who's basically measuring whether or not that's sort of true or not for you.
Right, yeah.
Whereas when you play the player rated, 1300 or whatever, you could beat them and it doesn't tell you if you're 1550 or 1750. So you may have, like, slightly felt like this was like a measuring stick game as well.
Yeah.
That sort of reflects your uncertainty about whether to trust my assessment of your playing strength.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. So that's my thought. I think that was why, nerves exploded in a way, or a certain nervousness pervaded this game a couple rounds in, not being the first game that you played.
Yeah. We should show the tactic that I missed.
You don't have to.
To the chat.
You can just leave it up there for them. See if anybody can spot it.
Even look at it.
Yeah. So, um, so yeah, so looking at your opening play, you know, it didn't seem to be reading into what your opponent was going to do, or whether what you were doing was like logical or not, or like reading what squares pieces are going to in the future.
Definitely, yeah.
In the way that we had practiced doing it.
Yep.
So something to review and think about a little bit. I also noticed that you played like a bunch of different openings outside of what you
also,
normally do, which is very unusual
that's
for you as well.
that's also a funny thing about this game is I didn't mean to play e4.
Really?
Yeah. So from the beginning of the game, I was already not in the opening I wanted. I wanted to play d4 because I'm a d4 player.
It was like a hand slip, not like an exploration.
Yeah, yeah, definitely
Oh.
not. Now my other games were kind of, me playing messing. So there was the game against an unrated opponent where I played g3 first. That was
Yeah.
intentional.
That was intentional. Okay.
Yeah.
Because seeing that game as well, I thought like, wow, he was just like exploring the world freely.
Yeah, that was more an exploration. But this game was a hand slip
Yeah.
that I tried to. I don't think it I'm pretty comfortable in e4 or d4 position, so I don't think that had a major effect on how I played. I
Right.
think it was purely just my opponent's rating, all the things
Right.
we talked about.
But in a situation with any nerves, that's certainly not like I don't know. It could just be a coincidence, but it could have been another thing that was slightly weird, either causing nervousness or caused by nervousness.
Yeah.
My brother was a Caro-Kann player, and we were early enough in our chess development that it's not like he had 3 different openings that he played, right? He was just a
Right.
Caro-Kann player, and he played the Pirtz defense by accident just because, he was looking at his score sheet, not the chessboard. So just moving a pawn one space over. So I recall that. That was hilarious. I was playing on the board next to him at a tournament, and I saw him play it. And it was just hilarious that it was by accident. And that's how he beat his first master. It was like by accident
wow.
playing this opening and then just like, oh, what am I doing? So these things can go well or badly.
Yeah.
The fresh eyes, and the new territory.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think? Like talking about these moves today, like do you feel like something was off? Do you remember everything that we used to talk about? Like, is this something that we should like revise a little bit again, or just
maybe because
I
was trying to think about where my opponents were going, but I was wrong. I was just wrong in a lot of cases, and that is happening in all of my games that I played, where like I was like, oh, they're gonna go here or here or here, and I was making a list of candidates, and then they played something totally different, and that kept throwing me off in all my games.
Yeah.
So I was trying to apply, what we had gone over, but I wasn't doing a good job at it, I don't think so.
Okay. Cool. Well,
I'll leave it up to you to decide if we should. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And Baron, how familiar are you with the way that we're kind of talking about what's logical or not in these openings? And
I feel okay. Some of the specific like move order differences or where to put a piece specifically because of what someone did or didn't do, that kind of eludes me. But I think doing opening stuff would be fine, because I remember you telling me my openings were narrow and terrible. Or narrow and bad.
Okay.
I think is what you said. That I play a narrow set of openings, and most of the time I don't get good positions out of them.
Okay.
And
Hey, at least I'm honest. I don't just try and make everybody feel good, right?
No, So I was thinking about that when I played my OTB game this week. I was like, I haven't played. I was like, okay, I was driving up to the tournament thinking, okay, I'll do this if I'm white. I'll do this if I'm black, if they play E4 or if they play D4. So they played D4, and I was thinking, I usually play Grunfeld, but I've played Queen's Gambit Declined for a long time. I played Slav for a long time. I was like, I'll try the Slav today.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got into an Exchange Slav, and he played that. I was like, I don't think I've ever played again the black side in an Exchange Slav ever. And then I started playing some bad moves. I was like, oh man, I really botched this one. And that's when the suffering of the 2 hours began. Because I knew I shouldn't have done some things, and I did them anyway. And I was like, wow, this was a poor decision.
Yeah.
So yeah, it sounds like you suffer a bit from what I was suffering from, and still kind of am a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think with our work on attacks, we've reached like a pretty good point. Like obviously it's something that you can like circle back to multiple times and like, keep going to a higher level, but we've talked about focus squares, and I think that's gotten through pretty well. And now we're at a level where it's like just a matter of calculating some of these variations more precisely, and we've worked on that for a bit. And we could do another set of exercises that I dig up for you, but we can also circle around to the next thing. So and I think it's like great that you guys have been playing some serious games. It gives us like some fruitful stuff to really dig into, right? And it's not that we can only look at the openings of these games. That was just what I wanted to get to today. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned just by looking at these games. So why don't you guys pick one other game of Paul's to both look at the opening of, and then we can discuss it next week in class. So yeah, let's look at his next game, the round 5 game against Eric Kellogg.
All right.
Okay, and we'll look at the first 16 moves. We'll look through move 16 and just talk about at what point did we know what white or black was going to do? Were there more or less logical places for them to put their pieces or plans for them to undertake, that sort of thing? Okay,
that's a game I should know for.
So move 1 through 16 of Michigan Open round 5 against Eric Kellogg. We'll discuss that next week. Do either of you have any questions about today's material?
No, I wouldn't mind if we kept positions to calculate each week in addition to the. I mean, if that's too hard to provide, I'm asking.
No, it's not too hard
to provide. But I really enjoy those exercises. They're challenging.
Right. I will get you one if you promise to write it down.
All right, I'll write this one down. Yeah.
All right. Deal.
All right.
I'll get you a puzzle. All right. Well, let me see if chat has any questions about today's material. So, all right. Toto, Beyond Repute, Ursus, hello everybody. You guys have any questions about the material from today's lesson or anything about teaching method or anything to do with today's lesson? Anything it made you think of? There will be branch to branch this Saturday morning, yes. Why so awesome? Does that have anything to do with the lesson?
It was an awesome lesson.
What was the topic? You can ask me your questions after you watch the VOD if you want to, Eric. But we worked on a calculation exercise with an attack, a really difficult one. Definitely appropriate to your level, Eric. Yeah, it ended up taking us maybe 45 minutes or so just to go over it. Yeah. And then we looked at the opening phase from a few of Paul's OTB games. You'd love to see the end game puzzle with the weird move. Yeah. If everybody on here wants to try and solve like a puzzle right now, I can give everybody a puzzle right now. Or I could save it for some time when you're not expecting it. Instead of b4, white could go c5, e5, knight d5. Yes, Wrath of Gods. I said that b4 was unlikely to be the strongest move there and that he should have gone for more. And I suggested cd5 specifically.
What position is this? A puzzle that they're talking about?
It's the game where I said you had a good position and then you still had a good position,
Yeah.
but I had a number of like improvements for you potentially and said it never felt like you realized how good your position was.
Yeah.
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 How do you become a great chess teacher? It takes a while, Toto. But I think that two very important subcomponents of being a great chess teacher are being great at chess and great at teaching. So I think a great chess teacher has to actually basically be really good in both of those things. In a sense, I mean, and some jobs require, 3 different skills and some 2 and some 1. But I think in this case, you really need 2 very separate skills to be pretty far developed. So how to become a great chess player, we talk about all the time on here. So I'm not going to add anything general to that right now. You understand it requires a lot of practice and discussing your ideas and studying and talking with other people and working on different elements of your game. To become a great teacher, you have to really care about the people you're teaching a lot. That's really important. So you have to be motivated, and you have to be pretty good at figuring out other people, because everybody learns in different ways and each student's going to have different strengths and weaknesses, different ways that they're more likely to remember something, or different kinds of practice that work for them, different ideas, different senses of humor that keep them engaged during the lesson. So you have to be a good teacher. You have to be really good at discerning between different people and figuring out their different learning styles, and then care a lot about what you're doing. And then, like anything you want to be good at, you have to put a lot of time in. So you have to spend a lot of time teaching. Oh, and I got really good at teaching from spending time around great teachers. That also works with chess. If you just hang around with chess players, you get really good. I have friends who weren't who weren't child prodigy masters. They weren't IMs or GMs at young ages. But because they were friends of myself or other professional players and hung around with them, they got fairly good at chess from that. So spending time with really good teachers is a way to become a good teacher. I learned a lot just from my own teachers as a student. Instead of just learning the subject matter in the class, I think somehow I just picked up how to teach from some of my best teachers. How many hours a day I devote to chess? Well, the last 3 months, it was less than half an hour while my kids were home for the summer. Yesterday and today, Oh no, it's been 3 days now. 3 days since they've been in school. I've probably devoted 9 hours a day to chess, 10 hours a day. I mean, I did these 6-hour broadcasts on the Olympiad, and that was just a piece of what I did. I also did some dojo stuff. I prepared for some lessons. I did some training. So, yeah, probably 9 or 10 hours. You're bad at all the things I talked about. That's okay. You're young, Toto. If you care about them, you've got time to get good at them. And if you don't care about them, well, then it's all right. You can get good at something you do care about. How important is it to have a lot of material towards being a good coach? I think one of the really useful things a coach can do is direct people towards good, appropriate material, Wrath of Gods. And that again takes like an understanding of the students as well as of the material, and then having been exposed to a lot of material. I think it's a pretty useful piece. However, I think the most important thing for like a chess coach nowadays would be like helping the students come up with a plan, because there's like abundant material all over the place. And I think like some of the most useful things I do for my students is just telling them like this one thing is your focus for the next like 4 weeks or 6 weeks. So they stop trying to do everything. A lot of my students are trying to learn everything at once and not making a lot of progress on any of those things when I first talk to them. So that's probably even more important than having a lot of material. Am I going to be on PogChamps? Not this time around, Toto Young. I got assigned to coach somebody, and then they never wrote back to me about doing lessons, so I never ended up teaching them any lessons. So, who will win PogChamps? I have no idea. I haven't watched any of it. Will Kasparov win the 960? No. I mean, I wish, but no. Can we put together an OTB Dojo official annual get-together? Sure. Nobody's stopping you. Oh, you want the senseis to like agree that it's official as well? Sure. I think personally I wouldn't want to travel right now myself, so I might wait to see how the pandemic progresses in the next month. But I mean, a dojo get together would be awesome. I saw Wesley So sack a bunch of pieces by accident against Sam Shanklin today, Sokolov. How do you get motivated to play chess if you're not motivated right now? You don't? That's okay. You don't have to play chess, Far Eastern. Yeah. But I mean, for me, there's like certain things that like inspire me about chess, and then like, come back to them and get inspired again, So things that inspire me are like looking at some of the greatest brilliancies ever played, playing some of my own best games. That's kind of a source of inspiration.
Yeah, I put it in the chat, but I like to watch videos or do puzzles or maybe just read about chess if I'm not motivated to actually play.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's just whether or not you want to play.
What motivates me to study more is losing games I should have won.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know if I exactly recommend this practice.
Yeah. No, I mean that's your play is motivating you to study, but what motivates you to play if you're not feeling like playing?
Oh,
I
if
mean,
I don't feel like playing, I just play random blitz games.
okay.
Because
Yeah.
what helps me want to play is to study. Because after I study for a while, I was like, man, I really want to try some stuff out,
It kind of
see
goes
what
back and forth.
happens.
I think that's pretty accurate for me too. Like losing games makes me want to study, and then when I've studied, I want to go like use what I've learned. I think Finity has found like studying and having lessons was motivating towards going to then play in a tournament.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Would I say people in general worry too much about opening theory? Obviously, there's like basically if you just look at like chess books, like somewhere around 85% of them are opening books. Those books are not very good. The other 10 to 15% of books are basically universally better than those 85% of books that are opening books. And yet, the reason that they make 85% opening books is because that's what the market dictates, right? It's not because there's a bunch of chess professionals who are just dying to write books about openings. One of the reasons that opening books aren't as good as other books, I mean, I don't think like many people like wake up in the morning and they're like, I would love to write an in-depth look on the Tarrasch French. Like that's just the activity in my life that I haven't done yet. It's really calling to me is to write that stupid book, about something they already know, right? So, yeah, obviously everybody, everybody is overvaluing opening theory and worrying about it, etc. And for a lot of people, it's an arms race. It's like the fear that their opponent has studied opening theory makes them study opening theory. There are people who enjoy doing it and do it for love of it, but I think a lot of people do it out of worry/fear. Other than chess, what do I love to do? Actually, almost everything. Only few knows him. Like I'm actually interested in basically everything, but some sample things that I like. I like talking to my friends, which doesn't happen that much. I like hearing my kids laugh. I like to go out in nature. I like to spend time with animals. The online Olympiad, yeah, so I just commented 2 days of it. There's a lot of really great players playing in it. The level of play is mediocre so far, I would say, compared to the ratings of the players playing. I mean, they're playing rapid chess. Some of them aren't used to playing rapid online. Probably not like a time control a lot of people practice. One thing you'll see with the Olympiad is that people have these like FIDE rapid ratings that are sometimes like hundreds of points different than their actual FIDE rating, and that's because most people don't play a lot of 15-minute chess. I know 10 to 15-minute chess seems to be pretty popular with amateurs online right now. But when I started playing, it was an extremely rare time control. And basically the only people who play rapid chess much are like top professionals who get invited to tournaments that are using rapid chess to try and be more exciting in market chess. But like if you're a 2500 rated grandmaster, right? So like a lower tier professional, I guess, you might basically never play 15-minute chess. I mean, there's like not many like occasions where you would, right? That's not how you earned your norms. It's not where you won like prize money. It's just not like a normal time control. So you'll see that the top like 50 players in the world have like much more accurate FIDE rapid ratings, and players below them like just don't play much rapid chess. So most people in the Olympiad are not playing particularly well, I would say. The games are exciting, which I guess is one of the goals of rapid chess, but they're not very high quality. They're more entertaining than study worthy.
Curious how many people are playing the daily chess these days on chess.com.
Right. Probably still tons. And I think one cool thing about the Olympiad, I do like the format where there's like open boards and female boards and junior female boards, and making this like real like mixed matched team. I think that's really fun. And in general, I think like team chess is really fun. It's nice to be on a team. It's nice to watch a team.
Did you ever play in an amateur team? Like Amateur Team
Yeah.
West or anything like that?
Yeah, I played the amateur team a couple times. It was fun.
Yeah, that's where I played most of my tournaments in grad school.
Uh-huh.
That was so much fun.
Yeah. I have a friend who, like, I mean, very good chess player, but then we each hit like a phase in our life where we weren't playing much. And like the one thing he would still do was get together with his college friends and play the amateur team tournament, even though he's like a strong master. But that's like fun to just do like a reunion pretty much once a year with his high school and college chess teammates. Okay, we've got a question about teaching. I've been waiting for that. Thank you, Chess Culture. I'm always hoping that people are going to like ask me about, super theoretical teaching stuff after these lessons. Like, why did you have your student do 3 puzzles last week instead of 4? That's the kind of question I want to get into. All right. When you're playing beginners, they tend to play fast. When you play fast, when you think for your move, they also start thinking. I don't want to waste their time and pretend to think when I can play instantly. But if I play instantly, they also start playing fast. Have I experienced this? Yes, great question, Chess Culture. Yeah. So are you supposed to like fake thinking just to show them what thinking looks like? Is partly the next question. I mean, obviously, your first question, have I experienced this? Claro que sí. But what do I think about this and what should you do? Yeah, I've had to do that with students. I've had to show students what it looks like to think, even though I have not too much to think about against them. But another thing I do, Chess Culture, is I always play them at like massive odds. And that makes the game harder for me, and then there's a better chance that I actually will have to think and show them what thinking really is like. I think it's very, very detrimental, honestly, to play even games when you're, 2,000 plus playing against, under 1,000 beginners, because you'll be developing bad habits by playing games that are that easy for you. And so you'll just be showing them bad habits, which is you don't have to think. Any move is good enough. Whatever move they play, they lose. So they don't notice which moves are better or worse. So you need to like use odds to make the game really close, so that it's somewhere in the range of 25 to 75% win expectancy for you and the beginner that you're playing with. And then they'll get to see you actually do some good habits, because you have to figure some stuff out and you'll have to think, and it'll be hard for you, and they'll get to see emotion and effort and everything. So that'll go a long way towards solving your problem, because it feels weird to sit there and pretend to think. I agree. But also, you shouldn't really be playing a chess game where you don't have to think. Thanks, Beyond Repute. I'm glad you liked the show. Yeah, maybe so, Michiko. I mean, the streamers do it because it's popular. It's again like a market thing, like the opening books, right? I don't think GMs set out to like turn opening books into like a money-making racket. I think that the market demanded it to like a degree where, gradually over time, a lot of them slipped into doing it. So same thing with Blitz. Blitz is easy to do, and it's popular. You can make money by just sitting there and literally moving the pieces around mindlessly. and listening to music. It's unbelievable. So it's hard, I think. I think it's hard when you look at, like, a whole system, a whole market, hundreds and hundreds of people. It's hard to avoid the weight that is like drawing you towards the easiest solution that's also the most successful, right? Like when we try and do really more complicated produced shows on our channel, it means like hours of work behind the scenes to put on like a 1 hour show on the scenes. It's like a ton of effort, and it's not necessarily going to be more popular. It's just, I don't know. I guess we do it out of some kind of like, ideas of like what we want things to be like, and out of that sort of like teacher's motivation and so forth.
An interesting thing about that first game that we looked at, that was against a kid who looked to be maybe 9 or 10 years old, and he was so patient. He used all of his time down to the very last move. He had like 15 seconds left on his clock.
The one that went into a deep rook endgame, Aaron.
Yeah. Aaron Liu. And also another interesting, there was actually 2 Aaron Lius at that tournament, so they had to distinguish them by middle initial. So I thought I was playing a 1500 at first, but it turns out I was playing a lower rated Aaron Liu, which was quite funny. But yeah, he's super patient. So I don't know how his parents taught him that, or his coaches or whatever he had, but his time management was phenomenal.
That's great. That's great. Chess culture, I see some further discussion between you and Wrath of Gods, and I would add, like, yeah, I don't think that it's a waste of time. You're showing your students something. You're showing them how to like think, how to concentrate, how to focus. That's not a waste of time. It's a useful thing to show and demonstrate. So yeah, it might be more useful than playing a bunch of easy moves quickly and just beating them, and that could be a waste of time, right? Because they're not learning from it and they're not seeing what they need to see or work on next. Is there an odds calculator? Yeah, you just have to have experience, Cruel Cow. I don't know anywhere where it's like written up, this is how much you should sacrifice against this player, that player. And a new player often won't really have like a rating for you to go off of, so. Chess.com does have an odds feature, and I played with it one day with some dojoers, so I only experienced it one day, but the odds it spat out seemed to be pretty random. Like, it made me play like, king, knight, and 4 pawns against king, queen, and rook against like a 1700 or something. Like, it gave me some really weird positions where I had like nothing left on the board, and just like nothing to even move, really. So against students that weren't like 500 but were like 1500, 1600, 1700. So have I had students that were actually held back mainly from playing badly in the opening? Sure. I mean, that was like Paul's biggest problem 1 year ago when we started. Yeah, there's people held back by different things. But I mean, I didn't help Paul's opening by having him go read an opening book or an opening course. Yeah, if playing Blitz makes you play mindless moves, if watching people play Blitz inspires you to play Blitz mindlessly, then that may not be helping you. So. Yeah, that's right, Michiko. We're in these sub battles and they're played at like a Blitz tempo, and I don't like that or have any particular interest in it. And we do want to do things that get the dojo name out, but we definitely want to limit what percentage of what we do is something that's not, so to speak, the main true nature of the dojo. Now, it's not like none of us have any interest in Blitz or would ever play Blitz, right? I mean, you saw Jesse did his 2700 quest. He enjoyed Blitz. There have been times in my life where I enjoyed Blitz, but not too much. And there are dojoers who like Blitz. So it's not like we're stringently anti-Blitz. But we do have to strike a balance between occasionally doing things to spread our name and mostly doing the things that we think are the best and the most important. Okay, let me give you guys a puzzle.
And I'm gonna jump off for the night.
All right.
Yep.
Good night.
I'm gonna jump off. Yeah.
Thanks again.
Thanks.
Okay. So let's see if I remember this position. I think it might be like this with white to play, but you can start thinking about this. And I'll go check if this is actually the position, if I can find it again. You can compartmentalize it just fine. Yeah. Me too, Michiko. Me too. All right. Let me double check it, but I think this is white to play. Okay. This pawn was here. I'll just type some notes on my lesson while you guys work on this. But if you need me, just, I don't know, do something that pops up an alert for me. I guess Wrath of Gods can tell you how you're doing. All right. Did everybody solve it? Because I need to go to bed. I kid. But I do also need to go to bed. Should we go over the answer? Or should we do that another day? Should I just leave it out there for you all? Nice, Paul. Good variation. And if Far Eastern is around, this is something which now sometimes inspires me. You know, it used to be I would look at some smashing, like, you know, attacking game or something like that. But now sometimes just playing through an endgame study really is really great for me. So, yeah. So this kind of thing can be my inspiration nowadays quite often, something like this. Study groups can be key for staying motivated. Yeah. I was thinking that, you know, that like 1400 to 1600 group I did with Nordovik and Seth and Dritman and Falk, you know, they still like are like showing each other their games, right? 3 months later. And, you know, I have a question for all of them, which I suspect I know the answer to, which is like, what's the most valuable thing you got out of that 8-week session? Was it anything I taught you, or was it just the connection with the other 3 students in your group? And it's not that, like, you know, the lessons I did were pointless or not valuable, but I would bet that they got more and will get more, you know, long term, but probably already by now, get more out of just having been in that group than, you know, from any of the actual lessons and classes. Hey, Raiders. Hey, Benjamin. Thanks for the raid. Got to watch you draw a game with Jan-Krzysztof Duda, or I don't know how to say Krzysztof, but JKD. Congratulations. Very few people have survived playing him recently. Thank you. Take care. Be well. Good luck in your games tomorrow. Nordovik wants to know if it takes Bach 3 seconds to solve this or not. Or 30 minutes or 2 minutes. He's probably really tired right now, Nordovik. I'm sure he could find it. You saw we were wondering about the microphone. That's because Bick has like a mini fridge that he would just been like telling me about and showing me. Like his like streaming setup is like a mini fridge, so he can just like drink at his at his rig. And then we're like, oh, Bach's probably like making like, you know, popcorn or pizza or something. All right. And Benjamin correctly predicts that it would take him 1 second to solve this. Very nice. Very nice. Benjamin's very good at solving endgame studies, I think. If he wasn't always very good at it, then certainly doing like hundreds of like survival puzzle rushes, he gets a lot of endgame studies as he gets deep into those puzzle rush runs. Good morning, Greece. Yeah. Now, there's almost no white move that prevents rook c1 and queening. Right? So, I mean, in a game, white resigned this position because, you know, they figured there was no way to stop rook c1. But when you know that there is a way to survive here, then a strong player can find it, can find the idea for white, because, you know, it's like rook c1 check, king moves, queens with check. Okay, well, you know, it's too late for g8 or f7 or anything like that. This is a clever idea, trying to cover the queening square, but unfortunately it just gives the pawn a different queening square. So it's good to see that candidate move rook e1 like Nordovik was looking at. But it doesn't work. It covers d1, but allows d takes e1. He's actually Greek, Sinesia, for real. But he's been up for a while already. So the only move that works is rook d6. If the pawn takes, then this isn't defended anymore, so there's no real threat from black, and you can just take your time with these things, right? And if the rook takes, then you can promote with check, and your basic idea is to just get rid of these rooks and then go here. And that's GG. That's right, Ezra's. He saw it in 1 second. Give or take half a second. He had to. Just like white needed to stop black from queening with check, Benjamin needed to get to bed. So he had no choice but to solve it, and to solve it in 1 second. Yeah. All right. Well, folks, if you're just joining us from Benjamin's Raid and you don't know Chess Dojo Live, I can take 5 seconds to tell you about our channel and what it's about, so you could figure out if you're interested in following us and watching us in the future. It's a very educationally oriented stream. We've got 3 different teachers who take turns and run this stream. We've got International Master Kostya Kudvutsky, Grandmaster Jesse Cry, and my name is here. We're all very passionate about teaching. We also try to make it a bit fun. And we do chess, all kinds of chess shows, a lot of variety, game shows, tournaments for our viewers, and then we comment on the viewers' games, shows where we go over viewers' games that they've played in tournaments and bring to us. So, yeah, there's a variety of stuff we do here. I think I've got like a slide about some of it here. Look at that. The slide is still good. These are different segments we have. Viewer game analysis, Dojo Talks. That's a talk show. The Gauntlet's a game show. Here are some things about us. We thought that the best thing about our channel would be our teaching, but it ended up being the community of like really positive, supportive, growth-minded people here who work with each other. These are some things that we share about our teaching philosophy between the 3 of us. And yeah, I would guess that if you're interested in getting better at chess, or you just love chess as, you know, just an art and a science and a study that inspires you, that you'll be at home with us. And that said, it's time for me to go to bed too. If anybody has any final questions, hit me before I raid somebody. The next Ultimate Sensei has not been scheduled yet, Foos, but it is Kostya and my next absolute top priority. So it is truly going to be coming soon this time around. All right, everybody. Have a great day for most of you who are not in America. For those of you who are in America, good night. And we'll see you again tomorrow. Tomorrow there's a show returning, Foos Chest, that hasn't been on for a while. Endgame Sensei is returning tomorrow, so you can look forward to that. Cheers, everybody.